No wonder. All right. Good to go. I think we'll start. So this is what happens when you leave Parliament. When you come back, you get lost. Um, no. It's all right. No. When we All right, colleagues, I think then let's get going. SAA last appeared before us on the 15th of November, and we were to be briefed on the developments relating to the resumption of its operations in September 2021, and also the matters relating to the annual financial statements, the non-tabling of the annual report, an update on the progress of the SIU's investigations into alleged malfeasance at the airline, as well as an update on the strategic equity partner acquisition process. Subsequent to that, on the 14th of March, as a committee, we received a briefing from National Treasury on government bailouts to SOEs, and SAA, we were advised, had received some 50.7 billion in direct government funding since 2007, of which 48.4 billion was received in the past 10 financial years. So, as I'm indicating, those are the briefings that have taken place then in the period. We last met in November, and then we got that briefing in March. So today is a follow-up briefing on developments into SAA, and of course, as we know, there's a interim board that has also been appointed. The chairperson will be joining us shortly. So there's a presentation, colleagues, as is standard. We'll start with the Minister if there's any opening remarks that he may make, and then we'll go to the presentation. And then the SIU will brief us on an update on its investigations. So today is just really an update meeting, a briefing meeting on where things are, and then we will field questions accordingly. So colleagues, good morning and welcome. And good morning and welcome to the Minister, the CEO and the executives of SAA and the department, Advocate Mtibi and your team from the SIU and the ministry. Minister Kotan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the honourable members and my colleagues from SAA. My apologies for the Chair not being here, but I'm sure he'll join us shortly. We also want to leave you with a request, Chairperson, that for meetings of this sort, for example, a number of us had to come down just for this 3-hour meeting, and then we lose the whole day in terms of our work commitments. But we can motivate that in a letter to you. By way of background, I think in this age of sound bites, it's important to go back to the origins of some of the troubles, as you were pointing out, that SAA has been through. Prior to November 2019, the various so-called bailouts that government had offered SAA, I think they came in tranches of about 5 billion rands each, even in 2019 itself, until we reach a point in about November 2019 when 2 or 3 things happened. The first is a strike where an unaffordable wage agreement was forced down the throats of the SAA management by NUMSA in particular, of course, which claims to be an angel today. Secondly, the lenders required a guarantee if they were to supply any further cash to SAA. At that time, the request to the lenders was a further 2 billion rands, and the cash and the guarantee from government was not forthcoming. And the third was a decision by the cabinet that the aviation assets of the state should be restructured, and that in particular a strategic equity partner needed to be sought as well. Without going into too much of detail, this is where we begin to see some of the troubles that we addressed today. Of course, this is also then subsequent to the state capture period, but that's covered by the Zondo Commission and the SIU and the various activities that are taking place in that particular regard. And we then moved to the first week of December of 2019, when on the 5th of December, the board was about to, or 4th or 5th, suspend all flights because they essentially didn't have any cash. And if you recall, Chair, at the time, if, for example, you were in Washington, I was in London, and we had taken SAA flights, there was no way that SAA would have brought us back because there was no cash to fly people back. We then persuaded the board to take a stance which meant that South Africans should not be left stranded in different parts of the world. At that time, SAA did have its reach into various countries around the globe. But on the 5th of December 2019, SAA's board met, and at about midnight that night, after many hours of negotiations with the lenders in particular, came to a view that it had two choices. The first is to liquidate the airline, which would have meant a fire sale of all of its assets, no more SAA. At that point in time, there were some 8,000 workers who would be overnight without a job. And in terms of liquidation rules, if you like, they would be paid, we were told, somewhere between 28 and 32 or 33,000 rands each, and told to go home. Of course, the board then took the decision to move in a different direction and not liquidate SAA. And a lot of the events subsequently that SCOPA and other committees have been looking at is about how this other decision to move into business rescue was undertaken, was executed in a way in which today something like 800 employees, am I right, or more, still have their jobs. Those who had to leave through either voluntary severance packages or retrenchment packages left with excuse me, fairly substantial and more than adequate payoffs that enable them to make sure that they could sustain themselves while they look for alternate jobs. And we even started a training facility for a short while with the assistance of the Department of Labor and Employment as well, to assist those during, let's call it the gap period, in the event that we could get SAA back on its footing. So the business rescue process then commenced from the 6th of December 2019, when the business rescue practitioners were formally registered with the CIPC, the Commission for Intellectual Property and Companies. And as you know, in terms of the Companies Act, it's the business rescue practitioners who then take charge of the airline and its affairs. The board, the management, and the shareholder have no real say over what actually happens until the business is restructured and exits from business rescue. Eventually, a business rescue plan was formulated and accepted by creditors, I think in about July 2020. But you will recall, and some have already forgotten, that from about the 10th of March or so, we had COVID. And we had a level 5 shutdown in South Africa. And that is the period during which excuse me, SAA undertook, you will remember, flights to all parts of the world to bring South Africans back home, be it on the African continent, Europe, North America, and even some in South America as well. But those flights were undertaken in order to ensure, like many other countries did as well, that South Africans wouldn't be stranded in foreign territory. Because during the course of March and April, most countries locked down. There was no aviation to speak of. There was no tourism to speak of. Economies were declining, and that remained the case for some time as well. So, excuse me, we then moved to the middle of the year or thereabouts when the business rescue plan is adopted by the creditors, and creditors get a percentage or a small number of cents in the rand for every rand that is owed to them. My colleagues can give you the details of that. But it's only in September 2021 when money was made available from the fiscus for what is called the post-commencement finance, in which provision was made for 2 billion rands to restart the airline when it was appropriate. But much of 2020, the earlier parts of 2021, there was very little aviation across the world. Most companies, excuse me, took a huge knock. Many companies refashioned the internal parts of their aircraft to take cargo to different parts of the world rather than passengers. So that is how Lufthansa, Ethiopian, and many other airlines survived as well. I think it's in that context that we can then look at the presentation by Prof. Lamola. On the one hand, the impact of COVID. On the second hand, the impact of the recklessness and malfeasance that took place during state capture. And thirdly, the decline in the performance of SAA and the absence of cash within SAA itself. And in the fourth instance, the business rescue process, which got us to where we are today. So today we find ourselves in a position where at least there's some more competition in the aviation industry, locally particularly. And as SAA grows and the acquisition of the strategic equity partner is concluded, we will have even more effective competition as well. And the beneficiary at the end of the day will be the traveling consumer more than anybody else. So, Chair, with those brief background remarks, let me hand over to Prof. Lamola, and then we can take any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I just want to indicate in response to the issue you've raised about scheduling, the only dilemma that we have as committees is the hybrid capabilities are only limited to, or rather available to, 2 venues in Parliament. And due to the budget votes, we are unable to navigate that at this point. So it is a consideration that we have. It's simply a matter of that at this point we were unable to do so. But I did receive that request that you made. The only problem is that the budget votes are underway. So I'm pretty certain that as Parliament's budget is presented this afternoon, the Speaker will also make pronouncements on mitigating against that particular dilemma. So it is something that's noted. However, it's just that we as committees are constrained by budget votes. And we also want to hear the ministers giving us their budget votes as well. All right, Prof, over to you, and then colleagues will go to questions. Babam Tibi, just stand by.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, and Honorable members of the committee, the Acting Director General of the Department of Public Enterprises. Chairperson, I am accompanied from South African Airways by the interim Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Olinsky, Lindsay Olinsky, who may add at some point and assist me when we come to the issues of questions.
Please just pull the mic towards, right,
okay.
thank you.
Yes. Indeed, against the background sketched by the minister, our role will be to try and stick as much as possible to the brief as required by the committee in its invitation letter. And the presentation is more or less structured around that. We will address the issue of the financial audits that is in process, give an update on the current state of the performance of the airline, and I believe Advocate Mutibi will take over on item number 3 on the SIU investigations, and then we will be available to respond to any other questions that the members may have. Chairperson, to start with the issue of the annual report, to assure the committee that one of the major preoccupations of the management systems at SAA, including that of the board, is to ensure that the external audit, which started in earnest in August 2022, is concluded. As the committee is well aware, this is very unique and complex audit that covers historically 4 financial years, the 2019 financial year, 2020, 2021, and 2022. That is covering the period essentially from April 2019 to March 2022. That process is well advanced. We are in a wrap-up stage of the audit, where we have an agreement with the Auditor General, who are our external auditors, that by the end of June month, the audit will be concluded, and we will be having an annual general meeting with the shareholder, upon which those historical audits will then be made public. In tandem, Chairperson, we have of course concluded financial year 23, now in March, and the audit of those current financials, which are currently being considered by the board of SAA for presentation to the audits, to the external auditors. We are decisively working on ensuring that normality in the cycle of the preparation of annual financial statements and reports is returned at South African Airways, and we believe that going forward, by the end of this year, we will be back to that process. Just to indicate, Chairperson, that this has been a very complicated audit. Besides the fact that it has been historical, we also had to deal with the subsidiaries, namely South African Airways Technical, Air Chefs, as well as Mango Airlines, which happens to be in business rescue. And being in business rescue without the management support team that normally external auditors will depend on. So that is what in the main has been the cause of the delays that we have had. As management and as the board, we have been under tremendous pressure from the shareholder in ensuring that we complete this, and that we convene an AGM where the board will be reporting to the AGM on the performance of the company. Further on, Chairperson, against the background of the minister, as the management of South African Airways, we talk about South African Airways version 1 and South African Airways version 2. South African version 2 seeks to indicate a cultural and a paradigm shift on how SAA is understood and the strategic moment that SAA is in as it arises out of business rescue that is being restructured for a long-term sustainability with the strategic equity partner as has been decided by the shareholder. So we have in version 1 a South African Airways that is being rebuilt, which is in transition and which is trying in all its ways to be compliant with the various standing regulatory rules of the Public Finance Management Act and the intention in government widely post the Zondo Commission to ensure that SAA is a different and a capable company. On the operational level, we are emerging, of course, with a smaller South African Airways, where South African Airways used to have about 60 aircraft, to where we are currently have been flying between about 7 aircraft. And that has created a challenge in terms of what we call the scale of our operating model. The aviation industry, airline industry in particular, has recovered robustly out of the COVID pandemic beyond what was initially projected by various experts in this industry. And as a South African Airways, we have had a challenge that with the constricted capacity that we have, by capacity we mean the aircraft that we have not been able to exploit this growing market, and we haven't been able to respond to the desire of the shareholder in ensuring that South African Airways execute its national economic imperatives of ensuring that the consumers are relieved from the complaints that we have had about high ticket prices, etc. And also the concern that SAA be able to execute its mandate as a national carrier in performing in the intercontinental international markets.
Just 1 second, CEO. I'd like to welcome the interim chair of the board, Mr. Hanekom. We have heard from the minister. The CEO is currently on the presentation on slide 5, 6, and so we will be fielding questions once they are done, just to bring you up to speed. So minister's given a background, CEOs on the platform, so you will come in at that point. You can proceed, CEO.
Yes.
Welcome, sir.
Yes. As part of these broader strategic challenges, Chairperson, being also the market of South African Airways that has been eroded and captured by our competitors. The major challenge which is still extant with us is how we need to defend the traffic rights that SAA has traditionally had, which now we have the Air Services Licensing Council being inundated by emerging players in the market to take over those traffic rights. On Voyager program, we have one of the most celebrated frequent flyer programs in the world, really, Voyager, with a very strong following of loyal SAA members, who have put us under a lot of pressure that they need to redeem their tickets, their miles, by being able to fly premium long distance routes, which then puts pressure on us to have an international route network. All of this, Chairperson, has put us on, as a management and as the board, on a strategic view that the sooner the SAA is restructured, the sooner the strategic equity partner is in place, and fresh capital that is not sourced from the fiscus is put into the business, that will be able to then mitigate against all these strategic challenges. We believe that the route network plan that the board of SAA is operating on, where we have started with 8 destinations in September 2021, and we have been able to where we are today, where we have 12 destinations. that eventually, with the injection of capital from the strategic equity partner, we'll be able to really have a sizable airline that can serve the South African economy. Currently, Chairperson, in this past financial year, we've been able to move from our 8 destinations to 12 destinations. Towards December, we managed to the end of the financial year, to launch new routes, and we're able to be supported by the Ministry of Public Enterprises as well as the Ministry of Finance in approving our PFMA Section 54, subsection 2, in enabling us just towards December in extending our leases on 3 additional aircraft. And that really is what enabled SAA said massive turnaround in its financial performance at the financial year that we have come out on. We have a budget that we're executing currently, with the corporate plan that has been prepared, that has been submitted according to PFMA regulations to the department and the Ministry of Finance. And according to that financial plan and that budget, we are looking forward that by the end of this financial year, we will be doing 20 destinations, including 1 intercontinental. We are doing this, Chairperson, against the background of course, monitoring and working with the expectation of the SEP process in all the decisions that we are taking, medium term and long term. Just to highlight the 3 major developments that is really inspiring SAA's management, is the support that we are receiving from the Ministry and the Department of Public Enterprises in terms of supporting our route network and our fleet plan. As you can imagine, Chairperson and members, we have workers who are highly skilled in this aviation industry and in SAA, and particularly pilots and technicians at the SAA Technical, who are vulnerable to being poached by our competitors globally. So the more we are able to show that there is a future in this airline, the more we're able to retain those skills. And the decision that we had recently from the Minister and the Minister of Finance about us approving the application for extra 6 aircraft. So we are currently on the market to increase, to essentially double our fleet to where it is currently. We have also worked on some various touch points of improving our customer experience with the premium lounge partnerships that we have had with the Discovery Bank and Investec, which has, for the first time, South African Airways been able to turn its lounges into a profit center. That is working extremely well. We are just at phase 1 currently of that refurbishment. We are now moving into the major refurbishment of our lounges. Also, our cargo, besides passengers, passenger travel business, one of the major pillars of SAA's business model is air freighting and the cargo business, where a major step has been taken to ensure that that's in a sustainable footing going forward. Another element is the partnerships that we have in the airline industry, the code shares that the SAA has been able to retain and to ensure that even if we move into what we call in SAA version 3, which will be when we will be with the strategic equity partner, that we retain all those code share agreements, which are normally a reciprocal agreement between airlines, where they assess our creditworthiness, quality of our service, and our business plan. And we are very happy that we have enough reputation in the in the international market as a going forward. The flagship, of course, of our partnerships is the discussions that are ongoing with Kenya Airways, where we are believing that we need to change the landscape of the African aviation market by going together as a partnership and inviting other airlines as we proceed to join in what will be known as a Pan-African aviation group. It's not a new thing. There are about two such groups globally in Europe, which will be the first in South Africa, where SAA is a lead partner currently. All of this, Chairperson, of course, translates into financial performance scorecard, where we can say that we have had a successful year 2023. The financials, as members will understand, are still being processed and received by the board, and they will go through an audit process and through the processes of AGM, etc., and be made public. But all indicators are positive that the business is recovering to a level that the shareholder will be able to fulfill the obligation made in the MOU with strategic equity partner, that we are delivering a capable airline. We are delivering an airline that is just waiting to be scaled up. I will pause here, Chairperson. I believe members have perused the slide, of course, and give over to Mr. Mutivi with your permission, Chairperson, without me going into the SIU sections of the presentation. Perhaps maybe I should just deal with the last slide on the details of the strategic equity partner transaction going forward. The Chairperson, the milestone, of course, has been reached after more than a year of essential interrogation by the Competition Commission, that on May 12, the Competition Commission approved the Takatso Consortium acquisition of 51% of SAA with conditions that are now with the Competition Tribunal. And we are informed that the Competition Tribunal processes are already underway with all the parties that are involved in that. The second or parallel step that will then kick off, Chairperson, are aviation regulatory processes, where normally if there is any change in the ownership structure of an airline, our national aviation authorities required to be apprised and to give any approvals that are required. That process has already started to a degree where legal clarifications are sought by the lawyers of the various parties with the Air Services Licensing Councils. There is a number in parallel of conditions precedent that are, of course, traditional in these transactions: legal, commercial, governance, etc. There are work streams that are working on a daily basis to ensure that all these conditions are attended to, and as it is known that this is led mainly by the Department of Public Enterprises dealing with the lawyers. Ourselves as management, we have a very prescribed focus on ensuring that SAA operations are effective and efficient, profitable, and run according to global standards of airline management. We expect, Chairperson, which is of serious interest for us, is of course the closure of the transaction, where the transfer of the shares will actually take place. At some points, there's confusion in the public domain, where we always have to emphasize that South African Airways, up to this point, is still managed 100% by the current shareholder. There has been no transfer of shares yet. And of course, in parallel, the next step, Chairperson, will be the governance structures, the new governance structures that will come into place. That traditionally is encapsulated in a shareholders agreement, which is one of the parallel major instruments of these transactions that the shareholder is engaged in. And beyond that, for us as management and as people who are working on a broader strategic future of SAA, is the business plan, how the SAA that we are having now is going to be boosted, expanded by the ideas and the skills as well as the resources that are going to be brought by the Takatso Consortium as a preferred bidder now, working with the Competition Commission, and where we will have our business plan for a bigger South African Airways rolled out. Thank you, Chairperson. We'll end up here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, CEO. I think, colleagues, let's take all of it at one, unless you want to. Yeah, I think let's get the SIU presentation. Babum Tibi is familiar with how we do things, so I think we'll take it high level and cover the salient points. So, HOU, over to you. Acting DG, may I effect a reshuffle there of some sort so that the SIU can plug in?
No.
All right. Acting DG, you will come back as soon as it's done. Sure. All right. Babam Tibi, over to you.
No, thank you, Honorable Chair and honorable members. Good morning. I also greet and acknowledge the Honorable Minister and the Chair of the Board, Mr. Hanekom, CEO of the SAA, and my colleagues from SA as well, and the department, well, the acting DG. Chair, from my side, or from the SIU side, I'm joined by Mr. Lacheto, who will be running the presentation. He's the Chief National Investigating Officer accountable for this investigation. We're also joined by Mrs. Zodwa Klesibe. She's the provincial head in the Eastern Cape, but she's the lead investigator in this investigation. Also, Ms. Tobeka Mazwi. She's also based in Gauteng. She's the acting head of investigations there, but also assisting in this investigation. But of course, there's the whole team on the ground that's doing the investigations. If you can just page on, Mr. Lekgetho, there's a presentation outline, which we'll really not spend a lot of time on. And then the next one is the legislative mandate, which the committee is well aware of. The next one is the skills which we deploy at SIU to ensure that we crack most of these complex investigations. I need to just add that we have increased the accounting forensic accountants so that we can continue to bring out the expected outcomes. This next slide on the outcomes, Chair, if I spend just a few minutes for the benefit of those who may not be aware of our methodology. These outcomes, and as the board or the committee would see as we present, the outcomes would have been reached as and when evidence becomes available, and we are able to make findings, and we are able to make those referrals. Starting from the civil litigation, when we find that there's irregularities relating to particular processes, particularly contracting processes, we then take decision to institute civil litigation to recover or any other losses that the airline would have lost. The disciplinary actions, and you'll see as we present now, that it appears that most of those who are pointed to by evidence have largely left the airline. But I want to assure the committee and the minister and the chair of the board chair that those who left the airline, it could be by any other process, but evidence points to them. We will pursue them if there's any evidence of criminality pointing to them, but we'll also pursue them as we institute the civil litigation so that they are cited as respondents in the recovery process. We will not let them just get away with it simply because they are no longer at the airline. So on the other one, which is the prosecution referrals, as the board, as the committee would be aware, that we do make referrals, and there's a number of them as we present. You'll see that by law, when we find that there's evidence pointing to criminal, we then refer to NPA and work with Hawks to ensure that the criminal investigation part is finalized. The extreme right, we work closely with other regulatory authorities to ensure that any regulatory irregularities are addressed. At the bottom there, that black strip, which says systemic recommendations. Those are the recommendations that we do following any observation of inefficiencies that we would have picked up during the investigation, but in particular, when we conduct investigations relating to maladministration and poor governance in the entities. So systemic recommendations would then come at that time to the airline or to the department so that corrections or improvements can be made. Right, we go now into the proclamation process or investigation process itself. Just as a background to this investigation, around 2019, the SAA reached out to the SIU, indicating that they requested the assistant to investigate matters at SAA, possible corruption and other irregularities. We then, in terms of our legislation, we are authorized to conclude a secondment agreement where SIU officials are seconded to the entity, which is the airline in this case, to then conduct that kind of assistance. But in the process, we would then gather evidence that would have necessitated a proclamation process in this regard. We assisted SAA with the capacity in its forensic investigation department, and we collected evidence which, as I said, led to the motivation for a proclamation. The motivation was submitted to the Office of the President and was accordingly signed off in January 2020. The terms of reference of this proclamation, the next slide. In terms of this proclamation, the SIU was authorized to investigate the procurement or contracting for, number one, Airbus aircraft, maintenance, repair, and operations service of South African Airways technical services, the legal services in terms of a contract that's mentioned, RFQ GSM 073 of 2019, and that other contract RFQ GSM 117 of 14. We also authorized to investigate service providers to support and expedite the implementation of SAA's turnaround plan in terms of the contract that was sent out, RFQ GSM 15 of 18 and RFQ GSM 94 of 18. Now, the proclamation further mandated the Special Investigating Unit to investigate maladministration, as I mentioned, honorable members, in the affairs of SAA relating to travel rebate benefits, payments made to SAA vendors, and the implementation of 30% broad-based black economic empowerment supplier, and that was set aside initiative in respect of the supply and delivery of the jet fuel. The SIU was also authorized to investigate any irregular, improper, or unlawful conduct by officials at SAA at all levels, and this would include board members as non-executives, I would say, or employees of the SAA or any other person, and this is where the board members would come in, or entity, in relation to the allegations set out in the schedule. Now, the team went forth and investigated, and today we're giving the Honorable Committee update, and you'll see that most of the investigations are really finalized and with particular outcomes that have been reached. In this case, I'm going to now just request Mr. Lekgetho, who is overseeing the investigation, to present the outcomes of the investigation, and then I'll come in probably at the end when we deal with some of the new allegations that we have received. Thank you.
Thanks, Advocate. Let me acknowledge the Honorable Chair, Honorable Member, and Honorable Minister, the Board Chair, and the CEO, and the DG, and everybody present. In terms of this investigation, it's ongoing, and some of the focus areas are already completed, and they will be reflected as I present. When we start with the first one, which is the focus area number 1, where we look at the turnaround strategy, there we look at the issuing of the RFQ with a required response time of 3 days, and only one bidder responded, and there was no adherence to SCM policies and procedure. In terms of finding for this investigation, the investigation is completed, and there were non-compliance with PFMA and SCM policies and procedure, as well as the Treasury regulation and practice notes. And the value of the contract is 170 million. And during the secondment, SIU recommended the cancellation of the contract, which was done by SAAE, which resulted in the saving of 130 million. And in terms of the outcome, there was one criminal referral which was sent to the Hawks, and civil recovery, AFU is involved in the civil litigation to recover a potential amount of 40 million. And there's a saving of 130 million, which was not paid because the contract was cancelled. And disciplinary referrals, we couldn't do it because all the officials left the employment of SAA when we conducted the investigation. Focus area number 2, we look at the ground power units. The allegation is that the assets were sold by SAAT at a lesser value than their book value. And the finding or the progress is that the investigation is finalized. The SAAT disposed the GPUs at a loss of 5.6 million, meaning that the difference between the book value and market value related price and the value actual sold, and the disposal process did not follow the applicable SCM processes, and criminal referrals is already done. And when we look at the outcomes, we have to refer criminal referrals to the Hawks, and there's a civil recovery where a counsel is appointed for the recovery of at least 5.6 million, and administrative action, one former board member, membership withdrawn, and fine imposed by SAICA and SIU considering CIPC referrals against the company directors. And in terms of disciplinary, still here, we couldn't do any referrals because all the members left the employment of SAA. Then in terms of focus area number 3, we look at the logistics services, where we look at the bids and SCM irregularities. Here, the investigation is ongoing. Tender for logistics services value still to be determined. One company was awarded a tender, although their bids document seems to be non-responsive, seems not to have capacity to fulfill the bid specification. The decision to award this company was later amended. Instead of a new process, the board recommended that the bid be awarded to the supplier who had been providing the services contrary to the process. And investigation is ongoing. And in terms of the outcome, we have done criminal referrals to the Hawks, and we are to refer additional evidence of corruption, which mostly likely to be the entities or individual and one former official. In terms of the civil recovery, SIU is considering to set the contract aside on grounds of legality and possible recovery, whereby the quantification is ongoing. In administrative action, there's a possible referral of evidence against 4 former board members and former official of SAA and possible company directors. And in terms of disciplinary, all the members left. Focus area number 2, tire tender SCM and tender irregularities. Here investigations ongoing. We're looking, the outcome is the non-compliance with the PFMA and the SCM policies and procedure, as well as the Treasury Regulation and Practice Note. Value of the contract is 218 million and 375 million. Then in terms of the outcome, we are looking at possibly a criminal referrals to be made, and SIU is considering to set the contract aside on grounds of legality and possible recovery, where currently we are doing the quantification. And administrative action is 1 former board member where the membership withdrawn and fine was imposed, and SIU is considering CIPC referrals against company directors, and disciplinary referrals could not be made because the member left. Focus area number 5, we're looking at component support services contract, where tender irregularity in awarding the component support bids and corruptive relationship between payments between third parties and SAA employee and board members. The finding here is that SCM and tender processes were irregular. The value of the contract is between 1.2 billion and 1.8 billion. Payments of deposit amount, contrary to contract stipulation, indicate an irrevocable letter of credit. Other irregular payments made contrary to the stipulation of the contract. This amount are still being quantified by an accountant, and currently the amount is standing at 35 million. There's also corrupt payments between entities, third party, SAA and SAT employee, as well as board member. The flow of funds for all the related contracts are still being analyzed, as several bank statements were subpoenaed and currently being analyzed. In terms of civil litigation is to be instituted. The civil claim involved 2 legal firms as well. And in terms of criminal, there's possible criminal referrals of fraud, corruption, and facilitating of corrupt payment against plus minus 10%, including companies and individuals. And there's also civil litigation that is to be instituted, and there's a possible amount that is to be recovered exceeding 1 billion. And in terms of administrative action, there's also membership withdrawal and the fine imposed against 1 board member. And there's also possible referral of evidence against former board members and company directors to CIPC. And refer evidence of misconduct against 3 attorneys, that is 2 firms, to the Legal Practice Council. And there was also no disciplinary action that could be taken because the members left. And focus area number 3 is paint tender, where we're looking at the tender irregularities. Here, the finding is that tender irregularities, which include the non-adherence to compliance with the PFMA, SCM policy, and Treasury regulation, and criminal referrals. The tender value was standing at 19.2 million. And in terms of the outcome, there's referrals which was made to the Hawks, and the referrals include allegation of corruption, which include entity, individual, and former official. In terms of disciplinary, we couldn't take any disciplinary action because the official left. The third focus area relates to swap transaction. Here it's a tender irregularities and contract non-compliance issues related to acquisition agreement of the 2002 sales and leaseback agreement, which relates to Airbus, the SAA swap transaction. Here the finding is that no proof of PDP or reimbursement to SAA in full or in part. The amount of 824 million that is to the amount of 824 million, and there was no proof of refund which was done, which was received by SAA, and there was unauthorized processes relating to signing of documents pertaining to the amendment of contract, and no proof of any reimbursement in relation to maintenance expenditure or on lease aircraft as per the lease agreement between SAA and lessor. Investigation is still ongoing on this one, and under the outcomes we are considering the criminal referral against one official of SAA and one board member, and disciplinary referrals. Evidence pointing to the act of misconduct against an employee of SAA was referred to SAA in April 2023, and possible civil action to recover the 824 million and security deposit is still underway. Then in terms of focus area number 2, that is cargo aircraft lease, there we're also looking at procurement irregularities. And the finding is that the addendum to the dry lease contract was found to be irregular as no approval was obtained for the deviation. And the value is 185 million. Civil litigation process is with senior counsel, where papers were lodged at the special tribunal. And in terms of the outcomes, yes, that's a civil litigation. Motion papers were filed at the special tribunal on the 22nd of February 2023 to set aside the extension of the contract and to recover the 85 million plus interest. And disciplinary action could not be taken because members left. In terms of focus area number 9, we are looking at security services. Here, allegation is procurement irregularities in the appointment of security companies and the continuous contract extension since 2005 to present. The finding is that there is an irregular contract extension contrary to the PFMA and SCM policy and procedure, as well as the Treasury regulation and practice note. And there's also irregular expenditure identified amounting to 953 million for the period between February 2008 and to January 2020. And also there was no effective contract management at SAA or SAT. And then there's a possible civil recovery that is being considered so that the contract can be set aside. And disciplinary action, evidence pointing to the act of misconduct against an employee of SAA was referred to SAA during May 2023. And civil recovery, internal memorandum to civil litigation unit to review and set aside the contract and extension value to the value of 985 million is being prepared, where it will be referred to the civil litigation. And we're still considering the criminal referrals against the people that misconducted. In terms of focus area number 10, we are looking at OEM approval avionic parts. There, the outcome is that the investigation is ongoing and the value of contract is 5 million. And we are looking at the payments in excess, in payment that exceed budget and contract amount, and there are no procurement documents for this contract. We have requested the information from the service provider to no avail. Team is to pursue the conflict of interest investigation based on allegation that employees sign off the RFQ and the owner of the company. And we anticipate that this investigation will be finalized by the 30th of July. And here the outcome is to be determined once the completion of the investigation is done. Focus area number 11, we are looking at the provision of transport services. Here the finding is that investigation is complete and this was utilization of different evaluation criteria during the scoring process and irregularities during the evaluation process, and there were also irregular extension of the contract. There was also pricing error within the contract, misrepresentation regarding the vehicle ownership. The financial implication of the irregular extension of the contract amount to 83.5 million, which is the breach of. There's also a breach of contract, which implies that there was a possible amount of 6.4 million that could be recovered for the period 1 February 2019 to 27 January 2020. In terms of the outcome, evidence pointing to the fraud, theft, and corruption between some of the officials has been referred to the NPA, that is to the ID on the 28th of February 2023, and SIU is finalizing several the referrals for civil recovery to the AFU to the value of 6.4 million. And disciplinary action could not be taken because the member left. And the focus area number 2 is the provision of aircraft battery cells contract. There, the outcome is that the investigation is ongoing, and the 3-year contract was budgeted at 11 million, and the 2016-2017 year was budgeted at 6 million also. The actual expenditure for 2017 was 22 million, and for 2018 was 38 million. And an advance payment was made to the company contrary to approved policies. A number of payments were processed in terms of the RFQ, yet the amount exceeded the approved threshold. And in terms of the outcome, there's a possible criminal referrals of fraud and corruption that is to be made, and to civil litigation, we are to institute civil recovery, whereby currently we are still quantifying the losses, and disciplinary action could not be made. In terms of focus area number 13, we are looking at the provision of transport services, that is number 2. Here the progress or finding is that there was irregular scope change that occurred during the contract period, and the approved amount for the period of March 2016 to 31 October 2016 was 3.6 million, but 21 million was paid. There's a possible irregular payment of 15 million, and the investigation is still ongoing. And in terms of criminal referrals, we're still determining the liability. And in terms of civil recovery, there's a possible referrals to special tribunal to recover the profits that was made from the irregular contract. And disciplinary could not be proceeded because the member left. And focus area number 4, supply development contract. Here the outcome is that it will appear that an amount of 700,000 was transferred from an attorney's bank account to the supplier in question. And on 15 July 2016 and on 29 July 2016, the same supplier paid 700,000 and 119,000 respectively into a bank account of a company owned by a member of the board. And on analysis of such expenditure reports, the supplier has been paid a total of 6.1 million from 26 such purchase order, and bank details still to be obtained in order to determine the further transaction regarding the attorney's firm. And in terms of the outcome, criminal referrals, there's a possible referrals of evidence relating to the facilitation of corrupt payments to the NPA, and civil recovery, possible referrals to special tribunal for recovery of irregular RFQ amounts, and administrative action, referrals of Section 173 of Companies Act is to be made, and disciplinary action cannot be made because all officials left. And focus area number 15, working capital optimization contract. Here the investigation is ongoing. The value of contracts is 22 million. Bids were submitted late and should have not been considered by SAT. The same bidder was also privy to information not shared with other bidders, and high value stock items were reported to be obsolete and sold at a reduced or minimum value. The team is considering the allegation that SAT bought the same item at exorbitant price, and another contract that is mentioned there for the design of the organizational structure and the alignment of management capability is still under consideration. Then in terms of the outcome, criminal referrals against the former employee of SAT was made on April 2023, and SIU is facilitating the reinvestment of 14 million contract to SAA in terms of civil recovery, and disciplinary action could not be made because official left. And focus area number 3, we are looking at catering services. Then on 14 August 2015, after a competitive tender process, a tender for the provision of catering services at the OR Tambo International Airport lounge was awarded to the value of 85 million for a period of 3 years. With the when the board was advised on the award and the impact it will have on one SAA subsidiary who had been servicing the lounge, the chairperson of the board instructed that the appointment be cancelled on the 3rd of September 2015 and the service provider be reinstated, reinstituted with the subsidiary. And on 9 October 2015, a board resolution was taken in which the award was cancelled and the service awarded to a subsidiary company without going through a tender processes. This one, the investigation is still ongoing, and criminal referrals is still under consideration together with the civil recovery, where we still quantify and investigating to see where the liability lies. And disciplinary here also could not be made because the members left. In terms of focus area number 17, which is the provision of legal services, here the investigation is still ongoing. The findings that implicate other investigation of SAA staff and board members who were paid through the firm businesses and trust account, and this payment seems to have been corruptive payments which flow from some of the tender awarded to the entities. Flow of funds has indicated a possible of 71 million that was facilitated through an attorney's bank account, and we're still waiting for a number of bank statements so that we can able to finalize the quantification and look at the flow of funds. And in terms of criminal referrals, there's a possible referrals of evidence relating to the facilitation of corrupt payment to NPA against the firm, its director, and other individual. And there's also a possible civil recovery to be instituted against the company and individual, and value is still to be determined. In administrative action, one former board member where membership was withdrawn and fine imposed, and there's also SIU is also considering the LPC referrals and the CIPC referrals against the company directors so that they can be blacklisted. And disciplinary action could not be taken because members left. Then in terms of focus area number 18, we are looking at maladministration. After finalizing the key focus area of the investigation, the SIU will conduct maladministration and governance review in order to identify the following: the cause of the failure of governance structure at the SAA, the individual responsible for the failures, how the failures contributed to the position of SAA today, and accountability of responsible official, and make systemic recommendation on identified governance issues. Then over and above that, we went through the Zondo Commission, where we look at the report to identify some of the members, the matters which relates to SAA. Then the SIU has considered the state capture report relating to the SAA, and it is implementing its recommendation and working in collaboration with other law enforcement agencies. The following matters are under the investigation, and in terms of the report, the SIU is investigating the following. There is 10 matters which are covered by the proclamation are under investigation. Then these 10 matters are mentioned in the Zondo Commission report, and 4 matters of those 10 are finalized. The investigation is finalized. Then in terms of the outcome of the finalized matters, we have referred 2 NPA referrals and 2 disciplinary referrals, and 8 matters are currently being reviewed for civil litigation. That is to be referred for civil litigation, and the value of those matters or contracts amount to 2.3 billion. Then the next slide is a summary of all the outcomes that we have mentioned. We can see there the rent value of potential cash or assets to be recovered is 3.4 billion, and rent value of actual cash or assets recovered is 14 million, and rent value of contract or administrative decision set aside or deemed invalid, 1 notice of motion to be filed in the special tribunal, and 3 others are already in progress. Rent value of potential loss prevented is 130 million. Number of referrals made for disciplinary action against official or entities is 3. It's low because most of the officials have left the employment of SAA. Number of referrals made for administrative action, this one is still ongoing. A number of referrals made to the relevant prosecuting authority to date is 6. Number of investigation closed under the published proclamation is 3. Rent value of matters in respect of which evidence was referred for the institution or defense or opposition of civil proceeding is 1. We are currently busy with the interim presidential report so that we can outline all the outcome. Then in terms of the observation, due to state capture, some members of the accounting authority, including the ex-officio member, fail in their fiduciary duties to properly manage the financial affair of the institution, and the SIU found that some of the board members benefited from the corrupt payments facilitated by at least 2 legal firms. These payments are linked to a number of tenders awarded by SAA or SAT. And all this contributed to the collapse of government within the SAA. Then from here, I will hand over to Advocate Motibi to deal with the new allegation that we have received. Thank you.
No, thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. Just to restate that, as the Honorable Members can see, that there's really quite a number of investigations done and a number of findings returned. So as we move forward now, we really want to ensure that there's consequence management. All those who have been pointed to by the evidence, action is taken against them, including some of the former board members whose names we do have, and of course we'll make them available at an appropriate time. Honorable Members, I would like to indicate that with regard to civil litigation, which is really the process which we really want to ensure that we follow and pursue to recover, we have had a challenge. And if I say we, as a SIU, including the special tribunal itself, some of those whom we take action against have challenged the jurisdiction of the special tribunal. So they've went up to the Supreme Court of Appeal, where we defended and they failed. They went up to the Constitutional Court, and we are pleased that the Constitutional Court now has ruled in favor of saying the special tribunal has the jurisdiction to determine the legality of all these processes that we're looking at. So that challenge may have had an impact of slowing down some of the matters at the special tribunal. But since this judgment, we'll now see most of these processes now unfolding and unfolding quickly for recovery purposes. We thought it appropriate, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, just to indicate that as we were investigating, the team received the new allegations, and those new allegations refer to the Takatso deal, and this allegation, when we received the allegations, we've got a comprehensive governance process at SIU that takes into account the allegations, process them appropriately, contact the relevant state institutions, and to ensure that at the end of the day, we have allegations that fall within the mandate of SIU before we prepare any proclamation that can be signed. So this will follow the same process to ensure that it's looked at appropriately. There were other allegations that the teams received relating to the use of SAA aircraft to fetch vaccines. Yeah, on this one, the allegations was saying, was there any processes followed and was there alternative method available for the delivery of vaccine in a cheaper or less expensive way, and the price of vaccines and the cost of the transportation. In this one, followed again the same process of assessing them. As we said there in the last bullet point, that the team is in the process of still locating relevant documents, and at this stage we will provide any outcome of the assessment process at an appropriate time. We have contacted the department. We dealt with the legal advisor of the department. The department will give us some information which will assist us in taking a final decision in this regard. Well, the last slide really is just about some of the risks that we have identified, but none of these risks have really materialized. They are on hand. The CEO and his team, they're really assisting us to ensure that we get the cooperation that's required. In areas where there are there's deliberate non-compliance or non-cooperation, we then resort to the powers that we have in terms of search and seizure and so on. But this has really not occurred as yet. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members.
Siyabulela kwakhona. Right, our tool 2 is we're going to start with Ubabo Somyo, whom I will request once he's asked his questions, we put responses. He is chairing a mini plenary of the budget votes, and so we'll be excusing him once he's done. So we will take his set of questions first and then give responses. And I know that, Mr. Chairperson, if there's anything you'd like to add, please join in on the responses that will be provided. So let's go to Babu Somyo first, and then Honorable Lee, stand by.
But thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to the Minister and the Department, Acting DG, the Chairperson of the Board, Munir Hanakom, Mohandet. Good to see you. Yeah, the head of SIU and the entire unit, the officials, our officials. I've listened into the reports, both reports. There are some comforting areas in as far as the presentation on the SAA is concerned in terms of the progress which has been outlined, and there are a few areas of discomfort as well in terms of that presentation. One of those, there's a reference on the purchase of six Airbuses after the approval by Treasury, and at this moment of the negotiations of the deal, the asset base then is somewhat expanded in a way. There's a continuous expansion of that asset base, and with such an accrued asset base, where do we stand currently in terms of the assessment of SAA's asset base? Secondly, we find out that there is as well some approvals made in terms of the recommendations by the Competition Commission, which is a step-by-step approval, and if that comes in at the time of this wide noise on the deal itself, how would the two correlate? You see, I'm asking that question to yourselves, but it would as well be good that that kind of a question would go to the Competition Commission. The time might come, but to yourselves, how do you somewhat view in a comparative instance that kind of an approval or recommendation going forward? The third area is the area which equally goes to the SIU, which says in terms of your new areas, the same deal is under your eye, and does it mean now that there is these other things, the progress and all that stuff, you're still looking into pursuing that kind of investigation going forward? And what are the, knowing your assessment, which is as well undertaken, what are the current focus areas in as far as such is concerned? The last question, which as well equally goes to yourself, is that there's a number of instances where you are referring to disciplinary referrals, which you say there's none because a number of those involved have left the entity. Have you established where have they gone? Is there any way that you would have established that so has gone? I'm asking that question with interest because some of them might have been absorbed in various other state-owned entities, or they are in government as we speak. So they are enjoying their time after messing up, you see, in as far as this entity is concerned. Has there been any an established track of where such individuals would have somewhat gone after this kind of an indication as far as the investigations are concerned? Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much. Can we get responses to that?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Honorable Somio. The 6 aircraft, South African Airways doesn't have the cash to purchase any aircraft. Those are leased aircraft, so they don't constitute part of the asset base. And the leasing is done on a staggered basis as they are able to increase, as was pointed out, the number of routes that SAA is able to undertake in a profitable way. So to repeat, there's no purchase of an aircraft. It does not have the cash to be able to do so. They are the normal leasing requirements. For example, this morning, there was no 605 flight from SAA because the aircraft they would have used was undergoing some maintenance by the airline. So we all took a 6:30 flight and then got delayed in the traffic. So that's the first point, Chair. The second, I think Honorable Somio characterizes the current situation very well when he talks about the wide noise, because that's precisely what it is. And I've indicated to this committee and other committees before, now that we've saved, and that's why I gave the context earlier on, Chairperson, we had a choice: liquidate SAA, kill it, distribute it, sell it in all its different parts, or save it and make it work. We were trying to make it work. So that's a choice. So, and it was happening in the middle of the pandemic. It wasn't happening in a normal environment as well, which we tend to actually forget. And today, they would be competitive. Well, if you look at the list of people who would want to make representations to the competition tribunal, I haven't seen it, but I've just heard anecdotes about it, you'll get a sense for competitors who want to make sure SAA doesn't move into the SCP direction, and disruptors who want to, for one or other reason, not make this deal work, so that what appears to be a reasonably working airline now, which requires further cash injection before it can expand its number of routes, can now be put into somebody else's pocket. So the relentless push for further corrupt deals in this regard is still pretty much there. And to the best of our ability, we're going to make sure that it doesn't happen in that way. So the competition tribunal processes will continue, and unless something fatal comes up, those processes will be concluded as well with our participation and the participation with of SAA. The rest of the questions, Chair, are directed to Advocate Motibe. And as a preface to that, let me say that those who don't want this airline to work are using every single forum possible and available in order to create some doubt about one or other matter. And again, I mean, the choice we have is liquidate SAA. Break it up into its pieces. Let it be available to all those hungry people who believe that one or other part of SAA is going to give them some value, or make it work and increase its footprint, employ more people, become an airline that has a presence. When you look at the tarmac this morning at OR Tambo and see particular airlines operating, all those used to be spaces occupied by SAA at one point in time. It's all gone during this particular period.
Thanks, Chair and the Minister.
So I'll hand over to Advocate Motibe.
You know, before that, unfortunately I have to leave. There is a point which seeks to affirm my question line, which talks about the acquisition of 6 additional aircrafts following a PFMA Section 54 application during February 2023. And that is a bit emphatic even in terms of your actual writing. That's why I'm asking the question as to, are you adding on your asset base in terms of what you have reported to us in as far as that line is concerned?
What we're doing, Chair, is distinguishing between different forms of acquisition. I can acquire something from you in the sense that I borrow it for a short while. I can acquire something to buy it, and I can acquire, in this instance, to lease it. But leaving the word acquisition, which might create the wrong impression. At the moment, it's about leasing.
I think that should be
That's a fair feedback. Thank you.
Okay. It's fine. I'm sure the chair of the board will add to that. He spoke to this earlier on this month about the issue of the additional aircrafts. All right, let's get further responses. As I said, we will excuse Babusoma purely because he's chairing a mini plenary of a budget vote this morning as well, and so that's why he's got to. Over to you, Babusoma.
On the allegations, my colleague, Ms. Khasibe, will just give a high-level details of the contents of the allegations that we received, and the team is working on that in terms of assessing those allegations.
Okay,
thanks.
Sure. That's fine.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, honorable members, Minister, the Chairperson of the Board, Acting DG, and the CEO, our colleagues, good morning. Chair, just to respond on the issue of allegations, yes, indeed, we did receive allegations on the Takatso deal. Mainly, it's more on the interference in the process, in the administrative process of the department, in arriving or selecting the final company that was awarded. That's basically that. But our scope in terms of our focus area is very wide, Chair. What we've reported today, it's just the matters that we are focusing on right now. We've got about 101 matters, that just the contracts that we are investigating, and then we also have 42 aircraft leases that we are also looking into. So those matters we have not reported because our proclamation is quite broad. So we could not just focus on everything at once. So in terms of then the officials of SAA that have left the system, we are continuously doing searches on them. We are continuously profiling them to see if they have now been appointed in other state institutions. If that is the case, then we follow them, and then we refer disciplinary referral against those members in the institutions where they are currently working. Thank you, Chairperson. I think I'm covered.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. Let's go to Mazamban. Honorable Liz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Minister Gordhan. Prof, I've said good morning to you and your team, and a very good morning to you, Mr. Hanekom. Well, in our previous lives, we did refer to each other by first name terms, but this committee seems to not look at that as favourably as we did in our previous life. But Derek, nice to see you.
And we'll issue a waiver to this new to this reunion.
Yes. So yeah, good. Mr. Chairman, I think the kind of white noise that Minister refers to and what Honourable Somya was referring to really is around this Takatso deal, which is now nearly 2 years, I think, down the road. And they seem to be stumbling blocks. Now, one of the things that has recently come up after the Competition Commission's recommendations is that the minority shareholders are not going to go easily, and they're going to the tribunal, and there's suggestions that the state might have to buy them out. So my first question really is that is this something that is being considered to make the deal go through, and if so, what kind of value are we going to have to look at? I mean, we sold the 20% of the 51% to the minority shareholders for R8.16, but the value now of the airline after liabilities have been cleared is anywhere between 3 and 10 billion, depending who you're talking to. So it's even that small minority shareholding could be a lot of money. So are we considering it? And if we are, what sort of money are we looking at?
Chair, let me respond to that immediately, because the R8.16 is going to be completely misleading. And Mr. Makobe will also add to this. This is a matter for Takatso to deal with. Their 20% shareholding is in Takatso. It's got nothing to do with the state at all. And so there's no question of buying them off or paying them off, whether it's 8 rands or 8 million rands or 800 million rands. In this case, let me be quite emphatic on that. This is a matter between two people or entities that arrived at some arrangement. They must sort out their squabbles. Mr. Makobe, you might want to add something.
Yeah, it's correct, Minister. You've covered it. It's a matter that must be handled by Tagazo and also the minorities. It is a condition that has been imposed by the Competition Commission that the minorities must divest, and it's a matter that Tagazo will then handle between themselves.
Thank you for that reassurance, Minister, that won't sort of become another bailout, because if it did, it would have other implications, because the shareholding then, the 51.49% would change, and so there would be implications there as well. The Harith, which is the majority shareholder in Takatso, publicly stated a couple of weeks ago that they haven't yet sourced the 3 billion rand required in terms of the agreement, which we haven't yet seen, but certain aspects have been made known to us. Now, Prof, you made, quite correctly, I think, you made some good points in your presentation about the conditions precedent being fulfilled. My concern here is how are we going to ensure that that 3 billion rand is made available, given that it's, in terms of the business rescue plan, to be spread over 3 years. In other words, it's not it doesn't have to be in the bank at the point of share transfer, I assume. How are we going to deal with that as a condition precedent, that money will be available, particularly as the Harith spokesperson says they haven't yet sourced it?
No, Chair, we will make sure that Takatso puts on the table that which they're required to put on the table as we consummate this particular partnership between the private sector and the public sector. So all of those issues and concerns that might or might not exist will be dealt with in that process once we go past the competition tribunal stage of the matter. So as far as we are concerned, we have the assurance that the money will be there. It will enable the airline to spread its wings, so to speak, acquire more aircraft, either through leasing or other mechanisms, take on more routes, provide more competition to those who have filled up the vacuum, while SAA and SA Express and Mango are not flying to the particular routes, and charging ridiculous fares in the process as well. So in a very odd way, SAA will be providing the competition that's necessary to reduce the fares so that, as I said earlier on, the traveling public can actually benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Yeah, it is a concern, because if one's going to ensure that those conditions precedent are in place before one does finalize the deal, then it doesn't sound like they're going to be. But yeah, we'll have to go forward and trust, I suppose. Minister, you've indicated a couple of times now, I think, that the airline SAA has shown a small profit in the last financial year. Can we have some idea of what a small profit is? Is it 20 Rand, or is it 20 million Rand, or 200 million Rand? Obviously, it's not audited, so it has to be an indication.
But this one is spelled P-R-O-F-I-T, not P-R-O-P-H-E-T.
Yeah.
It could be either, you see.
Yeah. Chairperson, as always, of course, there are two constraints in our interacting with the committees in a public platform as such. The first one being the governance processes, as I indicated in my presentation, that the financial performance of SAA currently, we have management accounts, we have a draft annual financials that are still to be to go through the board process, and as the Honourable Liz will know, the board then gives those draft financials to the auditors. And until the auditors have verified, for instance, myself and the CFO here, we can say this is a number. And then we have a board meeting, actually tonight, where those financials are going to the board, and the board with the auditors might say there are accruals that have not been taken care of, there are adjustments that have to be made. So this X number that you thought is a profit is not actually the profit that you have. That's one major constraint that we have. But operationally and in the interest of transparency, Chairperson, is that we have operational profit at the SAA airline entity, and then you have the group SAA where we consolidate the performance of the entire subsidiaries together with the airline. What is of excitement for us is that the operational performance of SAA as an airline, where we look at the EBITDA, is positive, but it is not in the hundreds and hundreds of millions of rand. But it's very historical for SAA that for the first time in a long time, we will be able to come to the committee and say we have made a profit. The amount is substantial enough that even if there are accruals and adjustments that may be engaged in by the auditors, we will still be able to say we have made an operational profit. I apologize that I cannot give more information, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I mean, Prof, you have actually sort of given information that is useful. Thank you. I'm glad Derek is here because in our past lives, we used to get full management accounts out of SAA to the Parliamentary Committee. Even during the time of Dudu and Yeni, we used to get every bit of information that we requested. And it is disappointing that at a time of post-state capture, we now are not getting it. But nevertheless, I gather from what you're saying is, and I would assume, I'm somewhat disappointed because SAA, the airline, is clearly showing a profit, operating profit. But it would be very disappointing that SAA Technical is also not showing an operating profit because its potential, in my mind, is much greater than SAA Airline. And Airchefs, I'm afraid, Minister, that one I think should be shut down or privatized or sent away somewhere because it's not the market that you have for that company is very restricted, but there is a bigger market out there. So, having established that there is a small profit, we've also.
Chair, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Lees, but the chair of the board might want to add something, if he wishes to. And I'm not sure whether Mr. Lees is making a bid for Airchefs.
Well,
Chairman, I may be overweight, but Airchefs food.
okay.
Let's leave it at that, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
let's get Mr. Liz to complete his point, and then Mr. Hanekom can come in to give a response.
I don't mind, Mr. Chairman. People can interrupt as they, especially the Minister and Derek. Even you, Prof, you can do it as well. I can't remember what my point was now. Okay, my point is that the two of us are time for retirement, and join him.
I know what my point is, so don't...
No.
Okay, all right. Oh,
The question
don't
I
know
was
what
going
I'm
to
going
put
to do with the
then is
Minister, Mr.
there's a
Lees.
small profit, but it's an operating profit. So, whether the group shows a profit or not, we'll see later. But the point's been made about the 3.5 billion rand that was required to go to the receivership. And then I think we've bailed out 1 billion, so I think there's 2.5 billion left. But that's been reduced apparently, and I think, Minister, you've said that to us here, by SAA in some way or not. Where does SAA get the money from to transfer to the receivership to reduce, and I think it's around about 550 million rand that's been, the receivership amount has been reduced by? Where did that money come from if there's no profit really?
Maybe I should allow the
The acting CFO. All right, sure.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for that question. Yes, initially it was 3.5 billion that was required for the balance of the business rescue process. When, over the period of time, SAA did manage to actually realize some operational savings. So over time, we realized that what we actually did realize was closer to 2.5. It was actually 2.64, if I recall exactly. And that has been the amount which we have requested through the various governance processes, of which we received 1 billion in the last budget vote, and we received that on the 3rd of April. So we still do need the balance of that 1.5, but at the time it was 3.5, but there were operational savings which were brought in. We managed to reduce the amount required. Thank you.
Let's get the acting
Perhaps
DG.
to add, maybe to satisfy Mr. Lees, who Chairperson appreciate the detail that Mr. Lees understands the operation. The reduction, Mr. Lees, happened where management engaged into innovative ways of recovering debt. Some of the funds that SAA version 1, for instance, was not collecting from jurisdictions where SAA used to fly on the continent of Africa, where in our reading of the PFMA, we discovered that as an accounting authority, we are enjoined to recover all the monies owned by the state to the state wherever it is. So some little funds have been recovered from those jurisdictions. And again, as SAA reduced, secondly, SAA reduced its ticket liability insurance that is normally imposed by like the credit card companies, the IATA itself, and the air licensing authorities. As we reduced our flying, because we're now a smaller airline, we were able to intercede with those institutions and say, please don't hold so much of our money. Can you hold less of that money? And some of those little millions, as they trickled in, enabled us to then invest that money into operations. But as the minister also indicated, part of the restructuring funds that got SAA out of business rescue, there was a 2 billion rand that was allocated to the airline. And we went on to a very aggressive cost containment strategy of ensuring that our cash burn is low to where we stretched that 2 billion rand and ensured that SAA became as operationally self-sustainable as it has been to this degree. Operational sustainable, but the broader liability still hangs on us on particular unutilized ticket liabilities and other post-commencement debts that we're expecting to get from the 1.5 billion rand we're still expecting as part of the BRP business plan closure.
All right, thanks, Prof. Acting DG.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to indicate to Honourable Lees is that government is still obliged to pay the balance of the historical liabilities, which was part of the BR process. That is the point that I just need to probably underscore and articulate. And the other point that you've indicated was to ask that the money from Takatso has not been forthcoming. That can only happen once the deal has been finalized, because then that inadvertently means you are preempting the outcome when the process is underway. Only when the regulatory approvals have been sought, then that will actually follow through. So the Competition Commission and the Competition Tribunal, those are independent institutions that have their own jurisdiction and mandate that we need to respect, and all that, once it's been finalized, then all processes will actually give it a go-ahead. So that is very important to underscore and remind ourselves of. Thank you.
Honorable Liz, as you wrap up. Yep, Mr. Chairman.
I see you've decided to completely ignore me now.
No, it's the
They know much more.
reshuffling of speaking on this side. So blame them.
Okay. Thanks.
That's what they do to the new ones. All right,
Thanks,
over to you, Chair.
Chairperson. They certainly know a lot more than I do. But to Honourable Lees, who, out of respect for you, Chairperson, I won't call him by his first name. You know, I'm on the other side of the fence now. You know, but I think you've asked some very pertinent questions, very important questions, and if I can just add to what has already been said. Firstly, the acting CEO, interim CEO, mentioned that the board is sitting tonight, and so we've had to hit the road running. We've only been there for 6 weeks. We had to get the committees established. We had to appoint boards for the subsidiaries, and of course, one of the committees is the very important Audit and Risk Committee. They had real problems racing against time because all of these matters are actually overdue. The reports are overdue, but tonight tonight, in fact, we'll be dealing with the 4th quarterly report, which has gone through, including the reports of the subsidiaries. They've gone through the Audit and Risk Committee, tabled with the board tonight, and so we can't really say anything until the board has approved the 4th quarterly report, which then covers the financial year. But it is true that the financial year shows what we still call a modest profit, but it's not insignificant. And I think I want to say one or two things about that without holding up your time. The good news is that there's profit, including profit made by the subsidiaries. And I think that's very important. And the outlook for, you're quite right, the SAA Technical has huge potential to generate revenue, and it certainly has the capacity. Obviously, one is very disturbed by some of the things that have happened over the last few years, but these things are well under control now and being addressed, thankfully. But its prospects for this coming financial year, 2023, 2024, the outlook looks good, and that'll be in the quarterly report. The outlook, Honourable Lees, also for entire outlook for the aviation sector is looking so much better than it was a couple of years ago. So, you know, for the next years, growth is predicted in the aviation sector. So the potential to grow and continue making a profit is very high. Can I say that the corporate plan, which was also finalized, in fact, by the previous board, is currently still being considered by and studied by the minister and his team. But the corporate plan was, you know, the requirement is a 3-year plan. But in fact, they prepared a 5-year plan because you need longer term planning, which is useful. But the 5-year plan does include, you know, make assumptions. And one is that the 1.5 billion will be obtained. And the other one is that the 3 billion will be achieved, that the Takatsu deal will go through and the 3 billion cash injection will come through. And it was on that basis that the corporate plan was constructed. However, the further good news is that and we certainly don't anticipate, because it's really between the shareholder and the consortium. We don't, you know, there's no reason to be jittery about it. It doesn't seem to be. But should anything go awry and should it not go through, the airline will not collapse. Honestly, I can give you that assurance. It simply means that the growth will be held back, the growth as has been predicted. But as we stand now, even in the months post the preparation of the corporate plan, which I think was finalized in late last year, the prospects are already looking much better. So the current position. So both, it's not only the profit made in the last financial year, but the liquidity is looking good as well. So we're not in a fragile or vulnerable position as we stand. Then finally, Chairperson, thank you. Well, I think that's all from my side. Is that we can assure you that this board is working overtime. It's really trying to ensure that there's good governance in place, that all of the compliance measures as required by the PFMA King Report and other requirements, that we live up to that. We're being very careful, and we'll ensure that decisions taken as we go ahead will be preceded by hard evidence and good thorough due diligence. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lees, as you wrap up, and then Honourable Siweya, and then Honourable Mkonto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Mr. Hanekom for that, and of course to everyone. The information is important. Just a response to the acting DG. Of course, these things depend on finality, but when you go out and you do a deal and you commit yourself to providing finance, you either put a guarantee in place that's going to be honored after the deal is signed and the share transfer is done simultaneously with. But I mean, I'm probably teaching my mother to suck eggs, but I think in some ways you were too. But never mind, it's fine. I understand what you're trying to say. That these things happen in a sequence, and yeah. So thank you. Then in terms of the other sort of conditions precedent, what Minister, and I've asked you this before, and I'm sorry to say you didn't give me a definitive answer before, but perhaps we've got closer to the transfer of shares now. But the SAA Act itself, I don't see anything coming to Parliament to amend that. And we've got to the point in our sixth, are we in the 6th or the 10th, whatever Parliament we're in?
6th.
Where I'm told that there's just no more room for further bills to be introduced. And what the acting DG is saying is that there's certain, and Prof's saying, there's certain conditions precedent that have to take place before the deal's finalized. What is the status with the Act?
We are in the 6th Parliament. The 10th one, maybe I'll be there.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, okay.
Some of you will be around for the 10th, not all of us.
What's the status with the bill?
Yeah, I'll cover the issue of the bill, but just to clarify the issue of the 3 billion that Tagazo will have to put in, it is a legal obligation in terms of the sale of shares agreement. So we've got that commitment in terms of the agreement that there is a legal obligation for them to be able to do that. And secondly, the bill has been drafted and it's been finalized and is going through the processes within government. And of course, it will then come to Parliament to be processed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We look forward to seeing it, and what I mean, it's presumably it's a very short act. It's only about 2 or 3 pages, so it shouldn't be terribly difficult to amend it. Mr. Chairman, I've got so many questions, but let me just ask my last one.
Yeah, ask your last one, and then we can always come back for a second round.
My last one is this. I'm told that probably because you're making this nice profit, employees were given sort of out of the blue, an 8.7% salary increase on some particular day of celebration or something. Is that true? And if so, did every employee get it?
Through Chairperson, Honorable Liz, there has been no any money out of the blue. There's been a salary adjustment, a salary increase that was well thought out and worked out as part of the staff incentivization program at SAA. It's an annual salary increase. The last time SAA employees received an increase was in 2019. And this particular increase was budgeted for and clearly indicated that it was not for top management. It is only for the general staff, excluding the pilots and executive management, because the pilots are under a closed collective bargaining process, where negotiations on the pilots' salaries is starting actually during the month of July, as per the settlement agreement with SAPA. Had indicated that the only time that there will be a salary review for the pilots will be in August 2023. So, because partly triggered by that the SAA won't engage into a collective negotiation with the pilots on the review of their salaries, while at the same time the general staff who are not members of that collective bargaining forum are excluded. We had, as part of our risk management of the airline, have to deal with the issue of curing the staff morale at SAA during a very strained period of change management that the staff is going through, and so that we can retain all the critical skills that we need to retain. And there's a particular adjustment was made, is within budget, and the airline can comfortably afford it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, was it 8.7%?
8.7%, yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you much. Just stand by and we'll come back to you. Honorable Siweya.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the Minister, Acting DG, and the team and everybody and the delegation. I'm going to request, Chair, I don't want to do back and forth. If I can
put
ask,
your full set, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's optional. If you like Babu Swami, that's okay.
Okay, you know, on, I think it was Saturday or Sunday or so, somebody hinted to me and said, you must watch 405. And I listened to the former DG, the suspended DG. And I'm just flagging it to you and your colleagues and the interim chair, Mr. Hennekom, that I'm sure you know when something is told so many times in different platforms, it becomes true. I'm saying it from the context that I think it's in our interest, all of us, that SAA must thrive and go back to its glorious days. If I am a consumer of the product of SAA and I'm sitting and I'm listening to that and I'm not hearing an alternative voice, it will tend to be true. The danger with that is that I've listened to you, Minister, you are speaking about revenue collection, all these ideas that you have, products to give the consumer. But I'm not sure what is your tangible plan in terms of mitigating the damage which is done. So if you meet a person there by the airport and you're asking them, are you flying SAA? Currently, it's not their airline of choice. It is if I'm pressed for a meeting and other airlines are fully booked and they say SAA is there, it becomes an alternative because there is a cloud of some sort. And I think as you're continuing to do the work and SIU doing the work, can you also start redirecting your energy towards fixing the perception, which has got the potential to deal with your reputation? Chair, I also belong to a portfolio committee called the Public Enterprise. So I'm not new to this presentation. One, I want to ask, why do you keep on? So I was trying to look at the presentation you made there and you're bringing it here. Why do you keep on putting a target that you are not meeting, or is it because legislatively you can't edit it? On page 8, for example, you are speaking about, let's open it so that I correct it. In comparison, so so you'll speak about the routes in page 7, which are currently active. It's fine. When you go to page 8, then you speak about your target of March 23, about the 12 destinations and the routes. I am not seeing an effort of why you not, because clearly you have not met the target, and you had put it as if it's I'm lacking the word. So you had not put it that it's a long term for the whole financial year. If you don't meet it in the first quarter, you still have an opportunity to meet it in the second quarter. You had put it as an end to say, by March 2023, we shall be having this. While when you look at page 9, the first bulletin, you then say you were granted the permission to acquire, and in that accusation, in the acquiring, you then speak about it's for the rental, it's not for the buying, it's fine. And I think it's what Mr. Somi was trying to speak about before he left, that it is not so much clear, so it will give you an impression that it's like we're buying, while then when you clarify, you say it's acquiring in terms of borrowing. It's fine. I'm interested why you're insisting and not necessarily explaining it. It will give you a problem in future because in the third quarter, for example, if you don't meet it, I'll still come and ask. But you said in March 2023, you will be flying to these other routes to compensate on this. I'm also interested in understanding that in the 7 crafts that you say you are currently having, how long will it take you? And I want to play devil's advocate. The process of acquiring more might take the whole financial year, and. These routes that you want to add, the 4, Victoria Falls, Windhoek, and so on, are you still going to use the 7 craft, or the addition is reliant on the new crafts? So maybe it can make us to understand, because it would seem like you want to do some form of a PR of some sort. If you can clarify on that. CFO, how much revenue have you made in the previous financial year? Audited or not audited, and so on. I'm interested in that, and I will expand in the second round when I come back, Chair. Let me cancel.
Very much. Can we get responses to that?
I'm not done, Chair, sorry.
Oh,
I was just saying this one.
see. All right.
I'm asking them, I want them to answer,
Cool. All
and then
right.
I'm going to follow up.
Got you.
On page 10, bullet number 4, you are speaking about both the passenger and cargo revenue that you have exceeded in budget. Can you please inform us how much was that? And I think I'm fine with that. On your presentation, so it's to the SIU. I think I had written one, and I saw my colleague asked it about the people who are no longer there and how are you going to follow them up. On page 19 of the SIU, and your report is always, you must keep it up. It's always neat and easy to follow up. On page 19 of the SIU report, is it 19? Sorry. Okay, now I'm lost. I'm sorry, Chair. Just a second.
Fine, let's get, you can
We
come.
can,
back.
I can
Yeah,
come back
yeah,
with it
let's-
so that I look at it, but
so
I
that
know
you
it's on
can
page
just go
19
through
of the
that
SIU.
SIU presentation.
Yes.
Right, let's get responses to those questions. Honorable Mkonto, stand by.
If I may, Chairperson, thank you, Honorable Siwaya. Although the minister or the department will answer better on the issue of the dismissed DG, the issue of corporate reputation is one of our major concerns as the people who are operating the airline. And it really hurts us to learn that SAA happens to be not the airline of choice for our travelers. We have, however, scientifically receiving a contrary view to that one, Honorable Suwaya. In the industry, there are matrices, there are instruments, tools that have been used to measure customer satisfaction. It's called the NPS, Net.
Prof, I'm asked that the recorders, yeah,
Also,
your
yes,
mic. Yeah.
it's, the Net Net Promoter Score, which is an anonymous surveys that are conducted on passenger experience and perceptions of the airline. We are members of Star Alliance, and among the 25 members of Star Alliance companies, airlines globally, we compete on our NPS. And SAA has strangely, despite its emergence from its turbulent recent past, come out very favorably. And also we measure the public corporate perception of SA, indeed, as the honorable member says, as consumers of our product, through a Voyager membership. We are tracking, and we've been surprised at the monthly numbers of people who are joining Voyager. We are now having about an average of 700 new Voyager memberships. So despite the negative media perception that we are normally subjected to excessively vis-a-vis our competitors, we can do better, and plans are in motion. We have a media consulting company that is working with us. We have a very careful media strategy where we measure when to talk, when to not to talk, what issues we leave to the DPE to deal with, and what issues we deal with. For instance, all issues relating to the Takatso Consortium, etc. We, as the airline operating team, we don't indulge into media stuff on that. But indeed, it's one of our serious risks, our corporate reputation, and we do everything to protect SAA's image in that. Secondly, I apologize for the confusion, Honorable Siwaya, in maybe the slides. Normally, PowerPoint, there's normally what is called death by PowerPoint, where one tries to just summarize the major issues and not elaborate on a PowerPoint slide. But just globally to explain the number of routes that are mentioned in the power slides, where we mention the months. Those are not like performance targets that one will normally set in an operation. These are operational rollout plans that are purely just commercial. It's not necessarily having to do with that we are measuring ourselves against achieving them or not. And what the reference to the March month is to indicate the end of the financial year. So we were saying, according to the budget that we have now, our financial year ends in March 2024. And according to our budget, is that we will be having additional 6 aircraft to the 7 that we currently are operating, where all 6 of them indeed, as has been corrected, will be leased, which means that we pay monthly, and all of them are on a 3-year lease terms. After 3 years, the aircraft are returned to their owners. And this is not the first time. We have had another 3 aircraft that we have leased, the A319s, that we have just returned to the lessors at the end of the March month. What is in that slide the honourable member referred to, that shows that with a big arrow, that shows the move from the current 12 to 20. That is what is happening currently. The 4 listed destinations there are happening currently. We are not waiting for the 6 aircraft that the DPE and Treasury so for us is graciously so allowed us to lease, because before there's approval of a PFMA application, it is the most rigorous and the most traumatic work for us as management to convince the minister that we are not putting the airline in danger of financial distress in the future, that we might have to go back to the fiscus and so forth. So currently we have 7 aircraft, 6 leased, and then we have 1 that is in SAA books, which is the remnant of the old A340 fleet. That's why we're doing 12 destinations for that aircraft. The plan is that come by the end of the 2024 financial year, we'll have additional 6 aircraft. And the question of the honourable member is, how long is it going to take to get these 6 aircraft? The first 2 will be with us in a matter of about 4 weeks from now. The additional 4 we have had to go, being South African Airways, owned by the state, PFMA, unlike our competitors, we had to go on an RFP, so we are in the process now of adjudicating that RFP for the 4 aircraft. The process of the selection of the preferred supplier will happen in about a matter of 3 weeks, and then immediately after that, then all the regulatory issues of acquiring the aircraft will happen. We are aiming that by the month of August, which is about 8 weeks from now, we will have that aircraft, because included in that fleet is a wide-body, long-haul aircraft that we are going to use to launch the first intercontinental route by a South African airline in the post-COVID recovery, which only South African Airways can do, given its location, the capacity that we have, where that will be announced in the coming, actually during next week. Hopefully, this announcement will come out after all the other regulatory issues are cleared out with the destination that we are targeting. How much revenue in the last year has the airline achieved? 5 billion rand, 5.5 billion rand is the revenue. And how much of that revenue is cargo is around 310 million rand, both of which are above budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister.
So I think Honourable Surveyor makes a valid point about the former DG, as you know, they were very specific. I think it's worth repeating a few points, Chair, before I just carry on in responding. That this whole process about the DG started when the Public Service Commission wrote to me and said that they had a complaint by a candidate who was disenchanted with the process that she went through. I was then instructed by the Public Service Commission to investigate the matter. Mr. Makobe handled the acquisition of a forensic firm. An investigation was conducted, a report was prepared, and in terms of South African procedures and rules and law, DGs are actually formally appointed by the President, not by a minister. The report was accordingly submitted to the Presidency. The second protocol, if you like, within government is that the minister concerned in any particular dispute with the DG, and of course this wasn't a dispute between me and him, it was a dispute about what he did, is then managed by another minister appointed by the President. In this instance, Minister Lamola was appointed to manage this issue. He saw the report, he decided on the suspension of the DG, he then set up a disciplinary inquiry. That inquiry finished its work, and the outcome of the inquiry was that he should be dismissed. There are, of course, subsequent to that, 2 or 3 other things that have been discovered that has also been handed over to the Presidency to apply their minds to. So as far as we are concerned, this was a matter that started with the Public Service Commission and a report by a person who felt that he or she wasn't dealt with properly by the department itself. And the facts are there that speak for themselves in terms of the charges and the findings of the disciplinary inquiry. Now, in the first instance, the DG went to and applied to the Labor Court. Mr. Makobe can take you through all those processes. But in the affidavit that he submitted to the Labor Court, he speaks so disparagingly about the President, about Minister Lamola, and then last of all about me, and uses terrible language against the President. And this is a person who says, I still want to come and work for the state. So, as far as we are concerned, there is a fabrication of a whole lot of things around SAA that you correctly mentioned. We rebutted this many, many times. Why a particular TV station puts him on, that's up to them in terms of the freedom of expression in South Africa. But if we appear in one form or another on that TV station, we'll be repeating that which we've said already in the public domain. And now we hear that the SIU is looking into this matter as well. And that's what we call forum shopping. You don't succeed in one place, you go to another place and see if you can succeed there. So there's the Labor Court, there's, I think, even a High Court involved. Sorry? Yeah, I was coming to that. Then there's a bargaining council hearing sometime in June as well. But throughout this process, very disparaging language is used, right? And personal attacks on people, and personal insinuations that certain political parties have also associated themselves with. And very recently in the NCOP, those personal disparaging remarks were repeated by this particular political party's participant in a debate. So we'll do our best, as you're pointing out. But I've been also on SAA flights that are 100% full. And not because that's the last resort, because there's a whole lot of others that are available as well. Just by coincidence, there's an interesting report in the Business Day this morning. We had all sorts of denials about what happened at SARS. On the front page of the Business Day today is an article which reports that Gartner, which is an international IT firm, has had to pay $2.45 million to the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission in the United States, and I quote, to settle charges that it violated the country's anti-corruption laws by bribing officials at SARS. Right? So this is a matter of 6-7 years ago. But in the United States, this is now being followed up, and Gartner is still to tell the full story. But if you read the article, it'll tell you who was involved, whose friend was involved, how money was put into a particular friend's bank account or company's bank account. But all of this was denied in the past, you see. But I'm sure when we finally come to dealing with the matters that the DG is raising, and we're taking some legal advice on that as well, we'll be able to deal with, I think, some of the concerns that you're raising. But be rest assured that we are actively trying to rebut to put it frankly, the lies that are being spread at this particular point in time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I know that all these issues are important and in one way or the other interlinked, but I request a SAA focus. It's not to in your questioning colleagues, right? Honorable Mkonto, and then Mam Zebula will come in.
Thanks, Chair. Good day to you, Chair, honorable members, the Minister and his team, the Chairperson of the Board and Advocate Mtib and his team. Chair, I did not understand exactly as to the 20% of the minority stakeholders. Is it 20% of the 51% of Takatso, or is 20% of the 100%? And ultimately, after that transaction, who will be the biggest shareholder of SAA and with how many percent? My second question, Chair, is about the employees that have left SAA so as to dodge disciplinary processes that they were about to be subjected to. Have they been replaced? Some of them, I can imagine they were occupying key positions that the entity cannot run without those positions. Have they been replaced yet? And what happened to their pension packages? Were they paid? And another thing I want to know is, were there any restrictive measures, like maybe blacklisting them, as to prevent them from moving to other institutions or entities for employment from the side of SAA, or they were just let go because you decided to go? It's okay, go. We don't care where you are going to, and continue with your maladministration and corruption activities. My third question, last but one, there were news doing rounds immediately after COVID that SAA was owing A-Link millions of rands. And they even stated as to how the reason they were saying SAA was owing them. If that was true, how much was owed to A-Link, and was that settled? If it was settled, when was that amount settled with A-Link? The last one is a comment, Chair. It's good to learn that most of the cases that the advocate Mtibe and his team have referred to, they are going to be concluded August 2023, if I was following his presentation very well. Because, Chair, we have to conclude these matters so that we are all able to focus on the new role players, because there might be a lot of things wrong things that are happening, but these processes, because they continue endlessly, we can't be able to focus on the new role players, because the new role players have to be able to account as to exactly what is it that they are doing, and the recovery plans that they are presenting, are they moving forward? Are there benefits to this entity? But if we always focus on what the previous role players were doing, we might at some point lose focus on the new role players. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can you get responses to those questions? Mzibula, stand by.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Just to respond on this, the first question that the Honourable Member asked, I need to indicate that Takatso is a special purpose vehicle that has been implemented that has been implemented for the acquisition of Takatso to have 51% shareholding. And Takatso, it comprises of Harith General Partners and has minority shareholding in Serenix and Global Aviation. So those are the two minority shareholdings. So once the deal has been finalized and completed, government will be a 49% shareholder, and Takatso Consortium, comprising of these entities, will be a majority shareholder, which is going to be 51%. Thank you.
On the second question, Honorable Chairperson, about the employees who left, have they been replaced? No, and not necessarily. It is a challenge, Chairperson, because as you would have picked up from the presentation, some of these investigations are still continuing. So we are not able to act decisively against any employees until we have what the SIU has just announced as disciplinary referrals, where we have had about 3 recently, and on all those cases, actions have been taken. The SIU emphasized recently to us that even though, or if when we realize that there is a staff member, particularly given people at significant positions who are in the process of resigning or they are leaving, if they are being investigated, the matter is brought to our attention for appropriate action to be taken. There is about the issue of blacklisting. Indeed, when the entire process has gone to where we have particular names, that blacklisting process will be instituted. But we are very careful, Chairperson, that in re-employing, if there's any need to re-employ, we ensure that no one rejoins South African Airways when they have a cloud over their heads, that are being investigated, etc. On the question of pensions, we have tried on one matter. There is a matter currently in the Kempton Park court where it started against and around the issue of the travel rebate scheme, which was one of the most abused financial area in SAA, where when the employee left, South African Airways put an estoppel on the pension of the employee. In democratic South Africa, the employee went to the public protector to complain that SAA have withheld their pensions, and SAA reverted to laying charges as a way of recouping the funds that could be proven that the participation of this particular employee in that scheme, which was quite an elaborate process. So where we can, Chairperson, we do, but it is a very challenging process, and our wish is to do better than what we are doing currently. Thank you.
Thank you much, Mam Zibula. Okay,
Thank you
just
very
1
much.
second, Mam Zibula. Minister.
There was a question about Airlink. We're just trying to ascertain which group of creditors Airlink fell into. If they were part of the group of creditors, and these lawyers have these technical terms for it, or you want to take it on, they would have been paid a certain number of cents in the rand.
Okay, acting CFO.
Thank you. Yes, Airlink did fall into the pre-commencement creditors, which falls within the business rescue plan. However, they are pursuing a case in the court against SAA on that particular amount.
Thank you much. All right, Mam Zibula.
Chair, Minister, Chairperson of the board, and the officials, also the members of Parliament. Thank you very much. Chairperson, I think Advocate Motibi helped us by clarifying the issue of I'm sorry. I think Advocate Motibi have more clarified the issue was giving us problems with my colleagues here, whereby we found that people, when they leave, people that they will do wrong and they won't be disciplined. That was giving us a problem a bit amongst ourselves, because as it is, we're sitting here because of the pace of the public. How can you explain that to the people, that people was not disciplined because they left job? So it did convince us with those clarifications. Oh, Subuyile Some.
Okay, let's not disrupt us, please, with your return.
Board members, it's looking like they got a long hand on corruption. It's showing that, or it's giving us that where they are, they do what they feel. It is a problem, Minister. I think we need to look onto that carefully. There is no such
that you can be referee and a player at the same time. Minister raised the point of that time there was a wage negotiations was led by NUMSA. I do understand, Minister, what you're going through, but at the end, the workers, they need the earning. I saw, I think, not yesterday, day before, whereby, as it is, we're talking so much about the ESCOM, wage negotiations are sitting because people, they want their earning. Now, my other colleagues, they raised this issue of acting DG minister. It touches us if a person will stay over and over being a DG. But we'd like to know from you, Minister, when that DG will come permanent in the job. Minister, we missed SAA so much. I'm from KZN. We're going with other airlines. We are not happy. We are so used of our own. Please, Chairperson, something must be done. You'll talk to your team and make sure that we're going back home. SAA is our home, I thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we get responses to that set of questions? And I align myself with the last one. I'm a Durbanite.
I was waiting for that.
Who's not flying on. Yeah, you know, Minister, the other day, I think I was in Joburg, and the aircraft tails, it just looked like FlySafair has become the new national carrier.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the screens there if you arrive at the airport, whether it's a departure screen or an arrival screen, the screen is pink. So anyway, I'm a Durbanite who's not flying SAA to Cape Town. Over to you to get responses to those.
Well, Chair, that's business, you see. You leave a little vacuum, they will take it, and if you don't leave the vacuum, they will use all sorts of means, which the CEO of Airlink, for example, has used over the years, which I'm very familiar with, so he can come and contest it if he wants to get SAA out of the way. So, and you're absolutely right about the different colors, but SAA would not have featured at all had we not taken the business rescue route, got the backing of government, in fact promoted by government, and moving in the right direction. I think the honourable member is absolutely right about the previous board, but the previous board was there as part of the state capture campaign. So I'm very encouraged that the SIU is looking at the diverse set of issues that they've actually presented to you. The only area that I think all of us would be impatient about is the gap between what can be potentially recovered, which goes into billions, and actually recovered, which is 14 million or thereabouts, Mr. Mutivi. So we need to make a deal on that one. And the more money that we can get, the more SAA will have the capital to do what it is required to actually do. On the question of the acting DG who's sitting next to me, remember that we couldn't do anything until the disciplinary process was over. And we have to now go through a process of advertising, etc., etc. So we'll be looking at that internally. On the Cape Town, Durban, Cape Town route, I leave it to the honourable member on my left to take the responsibility for that.
Through you, Chairperson, Honourable Minister, the question is simple. We desire to fly what we call the Golden Triangle, which is Cape Town, Durban, Johannesburg. However, version 2 SAA is run on a much more stricter business principle, in the sense that we do not initiate a route or a destination unless we have done a thorough economic study that we will make money on that route. And the decision goes through a number of governance approval processes where the management team will debate the issue, do the numbers, case study, and it will go to the board. And the board will say, yes, we can start that route. And in certain instances, we also pass that through the DP. But Minister, another maybe important thing that has to be said is that the culture of the new SAA, differentiating itself from the previous SAA, is where we are avoiding to make a business decision based on political sentiments, where we try to ensure that we will not enter into mistake of being told that fly to destination to some destination, I can't mention names, because of XYZ. But however, if we had enough stock of aircraft, the Durban Cape Town route is a promising route that is on the horizon. But based on the economic determinations currently, and looking at the nature of the competition that has already entrenched itself on that route, we have to make sure that when we go into that route, we are not going to lose money. But we wish we will be able to do so soon, make money on that route. Thank you. I've said too much.
Then there was issue around unions. There was an issue Mamzebola raised around the unions.
We'll take that as a comment.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah. All right, cool. All right, can I just... I'm always the last one, so I want to pose my questions very pointedly. So the outlook is that there will be a modest profit for SAA. And so this is pre-merger or Takatso. Right? So the premise was SAA was finding it difficult to be financially viable, and so an SEP was being brought on board. The challenges, which maybe some can call a perfect storm, in an imperfect reality has now landed us with pressing the reset button and SAA rebuilding itself ground up. So a modest profit is now projected. So pointedly, is there still a need or a basis for SAA to engage in an SEP process if it is recalibrating itself towards self-sufficiency and self-sustainability? Because it was crisis and collapse which triggered the need for an SEP. Listening to yourselves, you are saying SAA is coming out of the woods and there is a plan, including the expansion of routes and so on and so forth. So is there a need for an SEP process now for SAA? Or are we selling for the sake of selling? Right. I'm going to put my full set of questions. I'm also mindful of time at this point in time. That's what happens when you come in at the end, right? When we met last year, the committee raised concerns about what will happen if Takatsu was unable to raise the required 3 billion rand. And I think in one way or the other, that concern has been raised this morning. But in response to that, in November 2022, the minister said, and I quote, "If that were to occur, there would be no deal. And DPE would have to explore other possibilities." So the deal is incumbent on Takatsu placing the 3 billion rands on the table. Of course, now there's been the caveat of regulatory processes which must be pursued. In this regard, what is the timeline? Because I would imagine that your planning, if you are to continue on this SEP outlook, is that you would be planning conservatively because you've got equity partners coming on who may have other business considerations and interests in terms of the outlook that will be taken. I know that there's an issue about the golden share, but even that is debatable. This equity partner will be having 51%. They're the majority shareholder. The golden share is limited to certain aspects. It's not a silver bullet. So your planning is therefore constrained. Now the question then is, what is the timeline for this particular process to be completed? And in the event that the 3.5 billion rand does not come on the table, what other considerations are there to mitigate that eventuality should it arise, right? So my clarity, therefore, is the sale of the 51% under the circumstances, the new circumstances of an SAA coming out of the woods, necessary? And then maybe, Minister, on a parallel basis, which would probably be something, not a detailed conversation for today, but one which we have thrown out to ESCOM, for example, and I've had a discussion with the Deputy Minister on Finance on this, and I raise it because the interim CEO has raised it, and it's around the PFMA and SOEs, because corruption, state capture, malfeasance, mismanagement are part and parcel of the problem in the main of what collapsed SAA and continues to be a hindrance in SOEs generally. That's part one. But see, these SOEs are of strategic national importance. And in my outlook, they're supposed to be generating, amongst others, revenue for the state to be able to meet its other social responsibilities, developmental outlook, and so on. So they are generally supposed to be a money-making reality for the state in order for it to. Now, the inverse is happening. It's bailouts, it's guarantees, and so on and so forth. Now, one issue that has been cited has been the complexities and the challenges around the PFMA, in that it does not allow for business agility. See, the interim CEO is speaking about how they have to go through RFP processes, whilst competitors may have other agility that they have. I've made the example with SABC, who's appearing tomorrow, that a disk machine will break in one of the production rooms at SABC. A tendering process will be required. The other two 24-hour station competitors will walk down the road and procure that disk holder, slot it in, and it continues. So, and you'll find many of these examples around business agility, which we must also take the fact that these SOEs are businesses. They have to be run like businesses, and that agility is necessary within the confines, obviously, of the PFMA. Anyway, with that intro, what I'm trying to gauge, Minister, is it not maybe time or an opportunity now to engage with National Treasury and all of us on creating within the PFMA the necessary agility as a response to ensuring that the SOEs can meet their commercial obligations whilst still holding on to the state strategicness in which they have been developed? Because if we are to fix the SOEs, right, we have to look at all the variables, and they are not just confined to corruption and state capture. Those are all factors. Law enforcement agencies must deal with it. But there's other variables to look at, so that we don't come back down the line and say, right, there's other constraints. It has to be a holistic overhaul at this point in time, because the opportunity has presented itself, whatever circumstances are. All right. All right, I think I'll leave it at that. And then, colleagues, once I've received my responses, we will ask a full set of questions, all of us, which will be follow-ups, and then tie it down. Minister, your team, over to you.
Thanks, Chairperson, and good questions. So, if I package all of the Takatso-related questions, money, timelines, etc., we, at this point in time, have no reason to doubt Takatso's bona fides. We believe that they will deliver the cash when it is required, and that they will have to solve their own problems in terms of their own minority shareholders. In terms of timelines, the Competition Commission process took about 10 months. The Competition Tribunal is set for, I think, the third week of June, where these representations will be made. And then there are a few more regulatory hoops to cross, Civil Aviation Authority, etc. So where are we now? Beginning of June. I imagine by the end of July, August, we should have completed all the regulatory requirements. In parallel with that, the acting DG and her team have started the process of engagement with Takatso on precisely the question: what are the time frames and what are the timelines for each of these activities, and what is expected of whom? So apart from dealing with matters of the past. Let's now deal with matters of the future. And that project plan, if you like, should be finished shortly, say in the next fortnight to 3 weeks maximum at the end of the day. Now, earlier you mentioned 3 billion, later you mentioned 3.5 billion. But I imagine you're talking about the same amount. Or is it the, yeah. So, as I said, we have no reason to doubt the bona fides of Takatsu in this regard. Now, why is an SAP necessary? I think there's a difference between a 7-aircraft airline, even if you add a few more, 10 aircraft, 12 aircraft airline, and a 60 aircraft airline, which SA used to be. And had it not had all the shenanigans that Advocate Motibi and his team have presented, that airline would have been in a different space today and would have been doing exactly what you said, which is supplying dividends to the state, as opposed to extracting bailouts from the state. So the additional partner is required in order to put in money which will enable the airline to expand along the lines that the Prof spoke about, meaning in a systematic way based on commercial criteria and a reasonable chance of success of those routes paying back, so to speak, its own cost for a start, let alone the profits that they would actually make in that regard. So I think the issue is not the current way of operating. The issue is the future growth. And I think the point made about workers is critical. If we've been forced into a situation through the business rescue process of almost 3,500 workers being asked to leave, I mean, that's a huge gap, although other airlines have expanded on the back of SAA. The aviation industry has a lot of space to grow. And there's a very limited window, if you like, on the continent. If you look at it 3 years, 4 years ago, the window was longer or bigger in terms of different destinations and intra-African connectivity. It's a big issue. But it's being dominated at the moment by one airline. I won't name names at this point in time. And you have got to go via that hub to get to even a destination 2,000 kilometers away on the western side of the continent, which is the current experience people actually have. So I think the possibilities of more dynamic partnerships, there's one on cargo now with Kenya Airlines. There was a lot of talking going on between a DG-led process, the former DG, Takatsu, and SAA colleagues and Kenya Airlines, and that will be pursued as we can find our feet in this particular regard. The point that you make on the PFMA and SOEs is an extremely valid one. But sometimes the limitations we have found through exercises that were conducted through Operation Vurendlela on the question of what stands in Eskom's way on the procurement issue. After a day's intensive examination, they came to the conclusion that which stands in the way is self-created by Eskom. Right, so firstly, we've got to remove the bureaucratic hurdles placed by the bureaucrats themselves, sometimes with good intentions to secure governance. But we're also learning that this is part of the process of making sure you hold things up until your friends get what you think they deserve. So some of that is still continuing. But that must be read, Chair, with the announcements by the President for the creation of a shareholder model for SOEs that is akin to some of the developments that we've seen elsewhere in the world, a centralized shareholder model. And there's a bill that will be coming to Parliament once it's been through Cabinet in the coming weeks. And the interaction between that bill and the PFMA must give us the result that you've indicated, i.e. the commercial agility and so on. But not everything can be blamed on the PFMA, I repeat. But read that in conjunction with the bill that is already going to be placed on Parliament's table in terms of the new procurement legislation that the Treasury has proposed. So if you take a combination of these factors, I think we might be getting to a better set of solutions in terms of how government is addressing this particular question. And sometimes we've got to go beyond procurement as the sole cause of problems that we experience within SOEs, when in fact, if you like, as some people would say, the real mischief lies elsewhere. And that, I suppose, is what SCOPA, the SIU, and others are responsible for looking into. So in sum, I think we're heading in a direction as a country where there'll be a new procurement legislation, there'll be a new model for SOEs, the dependence on the fiscus has to be removed, and that's one of the objectives of the model that we have been working on through the Presidential SOE Council, and the results of some of the work of the Council will be seen shortly when the bill is presented to Parliament itself. Thank you, Chair.
That's it. All right, Kulio. All right, let's get the final set of follow-ups. Colleagues, briefly, outstanding matters. We'll take them as a full set from all of you once so that we can wrap up. Right, Babu Somyo. Okay, we'll start from the south to the north.
Yes, I'm from the south, south countries. So thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and thanks to the Minister and the team and the SIU in terms of the questions I asked earlier on. Fortunately, I take your point with interest, Minister, and I agree with you fully that if ever we are going to apply PFMA or not to, we should be cautious in a way so that we don't necessarily get deeper into delegitimization of the PFMA itself. And therefore there must be time and space to apply what is there, because a number of other things are more caused by bureaucracy, and success or failure hangs there even on the capacity levels. On the question I asked, it's based on the fact that I'm happy on the application of Section 54 of PFMA in terms of what you're doing in terms of the acquisition. And I looked into the language in terms of that clause. That clause is using the term acquisition. You see, it's not dilly-dallying around it. It's saying acquisition or disposal. So the information which is needed out of that is on those two angles. Meaning, therefore, as the entity, you're getting into meeting some of the requirements in terms of even if you want to build or you want to dispose, you have to rely on that kind of a clause going forward. My excitement about it is that earlier on, when we spoke about the same deal and the effects thereof, the BFMA, a factor was somewhat, whether was it based on the urgency of the metals which were going there, BFMA application was not at the head in that situation. So disposal did not observe BFMA, and then acquisition involves a PFMA. So it's off and back the trail in terms of application of the relevant empowering legislation. One, how much was the actual acquisition in terms of your agreement with Treasury? And now we know that those 6 are leased, what have you, at what price, what kind of value proposition against what you would somewhat gain if at all you would rely on the actual acquisition as the piece of legislation somewhat stands on. And therefore, if you talk about lease, not the full acquisition, does SAA still have that wing of technical? Is there a link between SAA technical, SAA? Is there any technical capacity within SAA? And if therefore this has been part of the add-on in terms of your list, you see, aircrafts, where is the reliance on in terms of matters of maintenance and all that stuff? And where is the link between the existing capabilities? I know technical has been one of the hailed successes and a strong leg in as far as SAA's subsidiaries are concerned, and where somewhat do we stand around such. And then on your frame of issues which are going to are determinants of saying now we've arrived at a point of a full disposal. In the presentation of the SIU, we heard about the new matters which have been raised and which have required the SIU to get into them. You see, is it possible that such matters should match the speed of where the entity wants to go, so that there is no delay around those matters in terms of a clarity on them and the pursuance of such, if we arrive at that point, so that where the disposal process is looking at in terms of the timelines, there's absolutely no sort of delay around such, because it somewhat comes with money. You know, if there's a delay, the state must still provide, and so it eats into the fiscus one way or the other, and therefore, so the minister will have to have that add-on in terms of that frame that he has. If he had 6 matters, that could be better than the 7th matter, but it should as well be fitting into the prescribed timeline, so that there is absolutely no delay around those matters, without negating such, but somewhat looking into it within the timeline, which is a bit necessary. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Liz.
Mr. Chairman, 4 quick ones. The first one, how is it been possible to maintain the air license for SAA without being able to provide annual financials for the last 4 years, I think it is? Is there a special deal for SAA? Because I think that's normally a requirement. Then there was, just how many employees are there at SA? Because there was a media report, and I think it was quoting you, Chair of the Board, that there were 2,000 employees. And I think at the end of the BRP process, there were going to be about 1,200. Just how many are there at the moment? That's just a quick one. And then two questions that remained, I think, from our November meeting. We talked about the pilots' training bonds, and we never really got, you were going to come back after the meeting and give us a report on that, if we could please get that. And then the resignation of pilots. My understanding is that since SA2 took off, I think we've had some 14 pilots resign and another 7 on their way or something. Just so stats, please.
Honorable Mkonto. We're just coming in a sequence, colleagues, so that we are...
Thanks, Chair. Chair, my follow-up will be on the still 51% of Takatso ownership and 49% of the state. Is this not privatization of SAA? And the consortium with a bigger share, are we still having a state-owned enterprise here, or it has been sold and private owners are having the 51%? On what basis are we still saying SAA is owned by the state, looking at the share ownership? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Suwea.
Thank you, Chair. In that 51%, 49 deal, who's going to be responsible for appointing the board? And the follow-up about the revenue of the 5.5 billion. If you go to page 4 of the presentation, I want to understand that if that 5.5 revenue, would you say to us that one, you are making a profit, and that SAA, if it continues along those lines of 5.5, it can be self-sustainable? Now, the fourth bulletin there then speaks about over the many years as auditors with the qualified audit opinion. What is the plan to correct that? In light of the fact that there is some form of revenue that you're making, then explain that from that revenue, do you think that if you continue at that particular scale, it can be self-sustainable? Then how are you going to correct the third bulletin? And what are the mitigating factors? I see you're shrinking your face. I'm not sure if you don't understand.
We're good to go. Right responses to the full set of questions.
So to Honorable Somio, where are we? Right. On the PFMA, so you're right about the use of the word acquisition, but in this instance, as we explained earlier, it's about leasing of the aircraft. But when it comes to the disposal of the shares, there's a technical legal matter. I'll give a shot at it, and Advocate Makobe can add. The difference is who is disposing of the shares. So I think what the PFMA covers is when an entity itself decides, I'm going to sell 10 shares, for example. Then it is required to seek the consent through the PFMA process. In this instance, because of what the chair called a perfect storm, pandemic, collapse of the airline, etc. It is the department that was selling the shares once those processes had been completed. And there was a bit of to and fro about the legal interpretation of that, but ultimately both the Treasury and ourselves agreed that having obtained legal opinions, the PFMA doesn't apply in that instance. So where an entity sells its own shares, so let's say the board of SAA independently decided we're going to sell 10 shares, it requires the consent because it's a disposal, as you defined it. But where the shareholder is involved in the sale of shares, it's a slightly different matter. So, Chair, the Advocate of Makobe can add if he thinks I've got it wrong or he wants to make a further point in that regard. On the technical capacity, I think you're referring to maintenance on. The Prof will take that question in a moment. On SIU matters, Mr. Motibe will, I'm sure, respond to that. On Mr. Lee's questions...
Wait. Let them finish, and then if there's anything that's not responded to in this set, you'll just indicate. Babu Somyo, I'm chairing now. You are chairing there at the budget vote. There. There.
Yeah, they have that information. I don't. So they are making a note of all the questions they have to answer. The pilots training, resignation of pilots. I mean, I spoke to some pilots myself on an occasion last year, and because SAA or no other South African airline is flying overseas at the moment, and that's the experience that they want. They're going to Middle Eastern airlines. That's par for the course. But start an intercontinental flight, and they're going to come back, because this is still home. The Middle East is not home. And I'm confident of that as well. But the rest of the issues, the Prof will address in one way or another from his point of view. Then in terms of state ownership, Honorable Mkonto, so we already have in the state stable many instances where the state is a minority shareholder in Hensoldt, in Rheinmetall, Denel, etc., etc. And the reality is that there are going to be times when the state doesn't have all the funding to manage whatever it is holding on to, or to provide additional investment for a particular entity, enterprise, or business to actually grow. So this is not privatization in the sense that we're not selling 100%. Firstly, we got 49%. Secondly, we've got the golden share. And the golden share means we own the brand, headquarters in South Africa, transformation of the staff and management will take place. All of that is prescribed in the purchase and sale agreement and will be prescribed in any further legal documentation that we actually develop. But we do not have the financial capacity to hold on to everything as the state. But our intention was never to privatize. Our intention was to save the airline. Our intention was to avoid liquidation, because then everything would have been sold to the private sector. And the private sector is not necessarily coming from one community or the other. This is across the board in South Africa. So this is ultimately the best that was possible within the limitations that we had. On Honorable Siwea's point about appointing the board, there will be a proportional nomination of the board, as you would have in a commercial company. So if you own 20% of the shares, you can nominate board directors. They have a nomination committee on the board, and the nomination committee will scrutinize the names that you've submitted to see whether there's the right kind of people that have been nominated. I was talking to a business person recently who says this is how it works in a particular enterprise. But ultimately, remember that during that whole period of 2020 and parts of 2021, the message from all of the airlines was fairly simple, and that also addresses the 51% question. We're not prepared to put money into a private sector money into a public sector run airline because we're going to lose the money. So A, we don't want political interference. B, we'd like operational control. C, we want to bring in our own management teams, and so on and so on. And those are, I'm afraid, some of the things we need to agree to, given the disaster that we just heard from the SRU. Look at the billions of rands that still need to be recovered that the SRU talks about. And Advocate Motivi can indicate how much of that we will actually get back at the end of the day. But on your point about audit findings, the CFO will address that. And on the self-sustaining issue, I pointed that out earlier on, that you can then sustain yourself as a very small airline. But if you want to grow, you need capital injection. And that capital injection cannot come from the fiscus because of our fiscal constraints. It has to come from elsewhere. And there's a number of state entities that find themselves in the same position as well. Let me hand over to my left, and they can then all take over the questions, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. Pointedly, Chairperson, to the questions, SAA technical capacity, yes, indeed. South African technical is still there, very competitive in the global MRO market, maintenance repair organization market. It's even doing third-party work for other airlines. And it is a very self-sustained business currently with a very promising growth plan. The issue of air license and the requirement for financials, Honorable Lees, as chairperson, indeed, both these air services licensing councils, domestic and international, require financials, but they require management accounts. So on a monthly basis, as the CEO, I depose an affidavit with a disclosure that South African Airways still have enough money to fly for the coming months. On the number of staff, the current number of staff members at SAA cumulatively is 987. The 2,000 that was mentioned referred to the group, including air chefs, SA Tech, etc. On the pilot's training bond, we investigated the matter, Chairperson, after the last meeting, and we discovered that this is just a fancy name for what normally happens in any company. That if a company takes you out for training, for instance, if you are a manager and you want to go and do an MBA that costs 800,000 rand, you sign an agreement that you're not going to resign immediately after that graduation. And if you resign, say maybe 3 months after your MBA, you repay the company the amount of money that the company has invested in your training. And that practice is in place in South African Airways, extended mutatis mutandis to the pilots. And the issue on the resignation statistics, the statistics vary all the time, but we can say, Chairperson, that we currently have a complement of 87 pilots, and we are out on a recruitment drive where we are recruiting additional 37 pilots in order to be able to meet our extended fleet. The last time we looked at was during the last quarter. We had only about 3 resignations during the past 3 months. On the matter of the revenue, The revenue currently we say it's about 5.5 billion, but South African Airways in 2017, which was the last time the audited financials were declared, reported a revenue of north of 27 billion rand. So this 5 billion is not big money. It still shows a constrained airline. And this leads me to just throw in an emphasis on the question the chairperson raised. South African Airways is operationally surviving, but it's not commercially thriving. South African Airways, for it to be the kind of airline that it needs to be, still needs a strategic equity partner to put their capital into it and to unshackle it to a degree out of the full scale of the PFMA non-agile operations. The audit findings are there, and we have a set of audit findings from the 2018 financials that are being worked on systematically, particularly on the issue of managing irregular expenditure and the issues of consequence management and the strengthening of the financial reporting systems within South African Airways. Thank you.
Babum TV, anything on your side?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Just a few matters around the assessment of the new allegations. Honorable Somyo, we will indeed may ensure that we speed up the assessment so that there is no doubt of where we stand, and that process has to be finalized speedily so that there's certainty. Indeed, Minister, in terms of the recoveries, as I indicated, that now we stand with the special tribunal having received the Constitutional Court thumbs up. We will now start seeing that process now really unfolding and speed up all the other quantifications that needs to be done in this space so that all the matters has now to be enrolled at the special tribunal so that we can really ensure that we are on the process of recovering speedily. The exact quantum will probably have to wait until all the quantifications have been done, and then we could give a clear indication of the contract values that will be set aside or intended to be set aside at the special tribunal and the possible recoveries. Honorable Mkonto, earlier on you mentioned the issue around the length of investigations. We take that so that indeed, again, so that we close these matters speedily and the airline can really know, where we stand and look forward. But as you may have heard, my colleague at the back indicated, Ms. Kasiba indicated that there were a number of contracts that we were looking at. So we'll probably have to indicate if there are still any other contracts that are outstanding, and if so, how is it that we're gonna deal with that, and we will engage the CEO and of course the accounting authority and then report at SCOPA. Thank you.
All right, let me take this opportunity in all right, Mr. Somyo's question on price. Okay, sure.
I think just to deal with two issues regarding the shares and also the issue of the acquisition in terms of Section 54(2) of the PFMA. In terms of the Treasury regulation, there must be a document that is called a significance and materiality framework. So this document has two issues. One, it says the threshold in terms of the applications that they can make. So they won't apply for everything. There will be a threshold to say the transaction of this value. That's when they can apply to the minister. But secondly, in terms of what does acquisition mean? So in terms of the significance and materiality framework, acquisition also means the leasing of aircrafts. So it's defined in that subsequent document. So with regard to the transaction, Section 54.2 does not apply because it says before a public entity concludes any of the following transaction. So the transaction must be concluded by the public entity. But in this transaction, the shareholder is well within its right to dispose any shareholding in the company that it owns. So the transaction was not run by the public entity, but was run by the department as the shareholder representative. So you can ask which law applies. Then the Companies Act will then apply to this transaction and not the PFMA. And that's the legal opinion that we've also received on this particular matter. Thank you very much.
I agree with the defiles which are out of what appears in the legislation. They can choose whatever they mean, you see, but in the legislation itself, that interpretation is not dealt with in that form. What they ought to have done, for them, it means this, not to say in a conclusive sense that it legally means what they are meaning. You see, you could take it as your own choice, not what the law says. You see, I don't think that would apply in that format. And so the minister has clarified these other matters. You know, the price. What is the price of that? How much have you used for that lease?
Yes, it's the third time is raised in a span of 5 minutes.
The issue of the lease acquisition is competitively sensitive information, unfortunately, Chairperson. We compete in the lease market on the price that we get for our aircraft. We issue a tender. We have a number of lessors globally who compete for us to lease aircraft from them. Beyond that, we have our competitors who are watching this, who, when they know how much we pay for our lease, will then have some advantage against us. But ballpark is normally between for an A320, which are the aircraft that we are targeting, is normally between the current prices range between 220,000 US dollars to 240,000 US dollars per month. Okay. But that is an aircraft that will be about 15 years old. And if you buy that aircraft new, you'll pay about 200,000 US dollars. Okay. So the people who buy aircraft and lease it out in the market lay out that type of money. And this again, in a way, Chairperson, speaks to where SAA is supposed to go. Hence we say we need an SAP because we are flying this old second-hand aircraft, but ideally we need to buy new aircraft. And
go that again because the numbers sound the same. What would a new A320 cost?
An A320, a new A320 should be about between 200 to 250 million dollars. Oh, sorry.
Yes,
sorry,
that's
sorry,
where
I'm sorry,
my eyes
dollars.
kind of popped.
I'm sorry, $1 million. And lessor buys that and then leases out to the market for the range of between 220 to 240,000 a month. And this also depends on what is happening in the market. Like currently now, because in the Northern Hemisphere, it is summer, the airlines are busy, the lease prices are higher. In winter, when they are not busy, there are more aircraft available, the price is lower.
Okay.
So always Faris.
Okay, so again.
Multiply that by 6, multiply by 3 years, by 12, then it's a huge amount of money that SAA has to make sure that it's recovered through our flight operations.
And Takatso will be helping us with this particular commercial venture of expansion and the 250 million. Okay, that is fine. So the list we're speaking about is not honorable list there, it's the list of the aircrafts. So,
You can lease him too.
all right. Let me take this opportunity to thank you, colleagues, for your engagement and interaction this morning as we seek clarities on SAA-related matters and receiving the update. Obviously, as indicated, there's a board meeting this evening, and we will engage with the AG to determine whether they are satisfied with how things are progressing with the auditing, because there's outstanding audits as well, and we have to keep our eyes on that particular program, which is currently underway at SAA. So the whole thing is, Minister Kodan in his previous capacity had a program called Back to Basics. And so the expectation is that for SAA to be functional, effective and efficient and thriving, it first needs to go back to basics. So thank you very much, colleagues, Minister, Acting DG and the department team. Thank you very much. Chairperson of SAA and the SAA team, the executives, thank you very much. Babum TV, as always, if just everybody worked hard like you and did things like you, like SIU, I'm pretty certain we this side here would be jobless. We are kept in office because there's a lot of things going wrong, and it's a public lobby that render us jobless. The only way to do that is do things right throughout the public service. That's all we want. So hopefully things will move. Just two, three quick announcements, colleagues. Brigadier Berger will appear before us next week, Wednesday on the 7th, as we continue the ESCOM Chronicles. Denel, Tuesday the 6th, tomorrow is SABC. And then, as Lungisa has indicated, we are looking to an ESCOM-focused oversight insofar as completing these hearings that we have been having in the week of the 19th. This thing needs to be tied down, and we needed to bring it to a logical parliamentary conclusion in one way or the other so that we can deal with that. So tomorrow's SABC, Tuesday, Denel, Wednesday's Brigadier Berger, and the SEPS contingent, right? The National Commissioner as well will be in attendance, so that is next week. And then, all right, see you tomorrow at 9:30. Minister and your team, unless there's any concluding remarks on your part.
Just to say thank you very much. I hope we've given clarity to getting SAA into survival mode, and now we're ready for phase 2. Secondly, be aware of the forum shopping. Same people going to different fora, spreading the same rumors and stories, and trying to ensure that this deal doesn't happen because somebody wants to pick up the pieces on the side. So we might have an unintended liquidation if we're not careful about how we manage this process. And thirdly, Chair, we are into the phase of detailed planning in terms of the milestones that we need to cover in the coming months so that we make this deal work and have the South African flag still flying. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, we'll meet tomorrow at 9:30 for the SABC hearing. The meeting stands adjourned.